John was happy today. He had finally made up with his fiancée, Christina. In fact, John didn't fight with her at all. Christine had a tendency to get offended and throw tantrums on the spot, as is typical of rich, spoiled girls. But he loved his beauty and did not notice unpleasant flaws in her character, like all lovers. That's why, when John saw a flower stall shining with colorful lights, he stopped his suv to buy the most luxurious bouquet he could find there. After all, Christina had fine taste and high demands, so a bouquet from the supposedly guilty John had to match her status. However, the mood was still spoiled when he came out of the store with a huge bouquet and did not find his car. Such surprises were not to his liking. "Where's my car?" "What kind of mayhem is this?" he shouted to a road worker who was painting the curbs nearby. "Didn't you see the sign or what? Parking is forbidden here." "Your car was taken to the parking lot," the worker replied. "I have a fiancé waiting for me at the restaurant. I can't be late. And I left my phone in the car. I went out for 5 minutes." "How can you do that?" "Yeah, they all go out and get divorced like that." "Shit, the parking lot's around the corner. Pay the fine and go to your fiancé. It's a piece of cake." "Here comes a major with flowers. He won't let people do their jobs," said the road builder. John did not answer him. Every minute was precious to him. But why did he have such bad luck today? He took the bouquet under his arm and ran. And when he saw the sign penalty parking lot, he rushed to the booth where the officer on duty was sitting. "I have my car brought to you here now. A black SUV. Here's the paperwork. I need to pick it up right away. I'm late for an important meeting." "No problem," replied the parking lot employee on duty. "Pay the fine, take your swallow, but I only accept cash." Writing out the receipt and looking for change from the large bill John had given him to pay seemed like an eternity. "You can have change already. Keep the money." "I'm really in a hurry," John said, pleased with the turnaround. The guard obligingly showed him where John's impounded car was parked. The lot itself, where the cars were located, was untidy and shabby. It was evident that the guard had a shoddy attitude. The cars were arranged as they were. One gate was open. His automobile stood a little farther back. The guard took the pads off the wheel and was about to leave, but John stopped him. "Why is the car door open?" he asked the guard. "I don't know. Maybe you forgot to lock it." "What? I sure didn't leave them. You can look on the cameras. And the keys were definitely there." John slapped his forehead. "You've got to be so careless. There's someone in there." "Look," the guard exclaimed fearfully and pointed his finger at the interior of the car. Suddenly, from inside, someone's palm lay on the glass. It was covered with blood. The hand disappeared, leaving a bloody trace on the car window. And then there was a heartbreaking, inhuman scream. It was a woman. John rushed to the car and opened the back door. What he saw shocked him. He froze for a few seconds and stared in horror at what was happening. "Mother dear, you have an incident here," shouted the watchman, peering out from behind John's shoulder. "Help, I'm going to die," shouted the young girl as loud as she could, and passed out from the pain. "Run, call an ambulance, and then get some hot water in here," John Watchman shouted in a commanding voice. He began frantically rummaging through the first aid kit. Finding alcohol, he put it to the laboring woman's face. She woke up. John put a pillow under her head and clean disposable sheeting under her lower body. Luckily, he had a whole pile of them. He often had to carry his dog in the car. There were also clean sheets and towels, which John had luckily picked up from the dry cleaners today. "Don't be afraid, breathe. What did the midwives or whoever it is that deals with pregnant women teach you?" "My name is John," he tried to somehow distract the young woman from her fear. "Sarah, my name is Sarah." She began to have contractions. She screamed and squeezed John's hand with such force that he thought something crunched. And then he himself cried out in pain, either from fright at the stranger screaming like a wounded animal, or it was already time. But a second later the baby's head showed. "Now push," John shouted, oblivious to his own pain. Come on, it's going to be okay." And help is on the way, and so the baby was born, a red, defenseless lump with clenched fists. John picked him up, slapped him on the butt to make him cry and take his first breath. Then he wrapped the baby in a clean sheet. John thanked God to himself that he had bought a SUV that was so warm and spacious. "Boy, you've got a boy," John announced joyfully. Sarah smiled, but immediately a grimace of searing, unbearable pain contorted her face again. "Mommy, mommy," she screamed. And again the exertions began in a wave. Another child was born. Also a boy, but only a little smaller. He cried on his own and began waving his tiny hands. John quickly swaddled him too. The babies fell silent, warmed in the warmth of the car. Sarah lay exhaustedly under the blanket John had offered. "Thank you. Without your help I'd be lost. My darling sons. I'm so glad everything's all right. Oh, I'm so thirsty I can't stand it." and John quickly gave her some mineral water. She greedily drank half a bottle and smiled again. "I'm sorry I got your car dirty." The contraction started on the way, and I was carrying my suitcase. I saw the car standing there, and I pulled the door open. I thought, whatever happens, happens. I sat on the back seat, and then I don't remember anything. I guess I blacked out from the pain, and there you are, my hero named John O. I soiled all the seats for you. I'm sorry, come on, what's the chair? The main thing is that the boys are fine, they're all alive, and you did a good job. I almost fainted. Honestly, John laughed. "How's it going in here?" A guard ran up to them with a belated basin of water. "There's an ambulance coming." Wow, you had 2 babies at once. What a mother. A minute later, doctors and a paramedic arrived and carried Sarah into the ambulance. "Twins," John shouted. And for some reason, without knowing why, he felt proud of himself. It was as if they were his children. And it was true. There were no other people's children. I thought I'd give Christine a hint that it's time to become parents. "Where are you taking them?" John asked the ambulance driver. "To Central City," he replied briefly, and turned on the siren. And John stood and looked at the little people he did not know. The little people he had had a hand in saving. His soul overflowed with joy for Sarah and her sons. Of course, John felt proud of himself. He had not expected himself to be so fearless, and was determined to have at least 3 children. With this news and the desire to share the unusual event, John went on a date with Christine. Arriving at the restaurant exactly 2 hours late, he realized that the bride had already left. "And you have a note from Mrs. Barnova," the waiter said, handing John a doubled folded piece of paper. The smile slid off his face as soon as he read the contents of the message. It read as follows: "How could you? I waited for you for an hour. During that time, I realized that you don't care for me at all. Why do I need such a fiancé? What a businessman. My father has more money. And you're not that handsome? You know, I'll find someone better. You bet I will. Good luck. Loser." After these words, John became completely upset. His strength had left him. And no wonder. The day had been absolutely crazy. Not everyone could handle so many problems at once. For some reason, he didn't want to call Christine and make excuses. To withstand the onslaught of his fiancée, you need energy, which he didn't have right now, like a dead battery. But John knew what could restore his strength. A faithful friend waiting for him at home in a hot bath. Half an hour later, John was in the garden of his 2-story house, which he had also taken part in building, anticipating the aroma of birch broom and bath steam. The first thing John did was to flood the small wooden bathhouse in the backyard. Only now he felt how hungry he was when he entered the house. A fluffy whirlwind came at him with a joyous bark. It was Caesar, John's dog, who had recently turned a year old. He was a most faithful companion to his master. "Did you miss me?" John hugged the dog and ruffled his thick coat. Caesar barked merrily and wagged his tail. Then he stood on his hind legs and licked the face of his beloved master. And a couple minutes later, the dog was scrabbling at the door with his paw, hinting that he needed to leave to go about his doggy business. "Okay, you go for a walk, and I'll make you and me something to eat," John said tiredly. There hadn't been a crumb in his mouth since morning. While Caesar ran around the yard and chased the neighbor's cats off the property, John made a simple bachelor's dinner: scrambled eggs and bessia, and a vegetable salad. A good piece of meat with a bone was defrosted for Caesar. Smelling the food through the open kitchen window, Caesar began to beg for home, notifying the neighborhood with his barking that it was time for a snack for such a smart boy and master. "Come on, Stray." John smiled and put a bowl full of food in front of his friend. He licked his master's hand in gratitude. "Why, Caesar? Feel better about yourself? My fiancée left me today and didn't even give me an explanation," John complained to him. "You're the only one who truly loves me and will never betray me. It doesn't matter to you whether I'm rich or poor, handsome or not so handsome. You just love me and that's it." I laid John's head in my lap, as if taking his pain away. Caesar came into the house quite by accident. John had found him at a construction site he was managing. He was just a little puppy, a tiny, half-naked lump who couldn't crawl. He just whimpered, starving and cold. John picked him up, put him in his breast pocket, and took him to the vet. Then the doctor shook his head and said that the newborn was unlikely to survive. But just in case, he prescribed vitamins and antibiotic shots. John didn't give up. He took the puppy out, gently looked after it, and gave the injections himself. In 2 weeks, the puppy was walking, waddling unsteadily on stubby legs. But he ate for 5 people, which made his belly swell to such an extent that the poor dog would laughingly fall over on his side. Experts, having examined the dog, decided that it was a mix of a Caucasian sheepdog with a yard dog. Apparently, the breeder threw out a poor-quality puppy, having separated it from its mother, because no dog in the world will abandon its cub of its own free will. In addition, The dog discovered one interesting peculiarity. At the same time playing with the ball, he could listen to music and sing along. Subtle. For this he was named Caesar. A couple hours later, the companions were each asleep in their own beds. John on the couch, still undressed from fatigue, and his four-legged friend suddenly collapsed next to him on the rug. And no force, even in the form of the beautiful Christine, who hated Caesar, could separate the two friends. In the morning, the phone rang. John jumped up like a scalded man. It was 0900 hours. He had overslept for the first time in his life. "Boss, where are you? Why aren't you picking up the phone?" Worried, the assistant asked. "I had to hold a meeting without you and tell the directors you were sick. What happened? Need any help?" "Oh, sure it happened. Mike, lots of things," John said in a tired voice. "Yesterday, for example, people were born right in my car. Can you believe that? And then I got dumped by a hot girl on top of that. Just like that." "Yeah, business," Mike replied after a short silence. "Are you okay? By the way, do you know what you can carry to the maternity ward?" "Well, what should be carried in the gears? Maybe some things. You have a daughter, don't you?" "Well, ask my wife and send you the list." "Well, you're really something, brother. Who was even born?" Mike laughed. "Two tough little men," John said and smiled, remembering the babies from yesterday. He suddenly had a strong desire to see Sarah and her newborn babies. Besides, he was curious to know how the young mother had gotten herself into such a strange situation. Having received the list and bought a lot of things, he hurried to the maternity hospital, where yesterday's acquaintance was taken. Seeing the man with huge bags, the nurses became animated. "Oh, what a generous father. And who are you going to, young man?" the midwife asked. "To Sarah's. She gave birth to twins in my car yesterday," John replied cheerfully, and was surprised at the midwife's change in face. "In the car?" one of them asked, rounding her eyes. "And here we thought she was homeless. It's not like she had anything with her. He didn't even have a maternity card, and I bet the poor thing didn't go through any of the women's clinics. We had to put her in an overcrowded room." John felt uncomfortable with the judgmental stares of the women in labor and the clinic staff. "That's not my wife. And I'm not a daddy," he said. "It just happened." "Then why was a stranger giving birth in your car?" asked the old midwife. "Well, now I know him. Where's Sarah?" John replied. When he entered the room, he immediately identified where she was lying. Next to her was a completely empty bedside table. The other women in the room were full of groceries, clothes, and care products for themselves and their babies. It was obvious that their husbands and relatives had visited them. Sarah, on the other hand, had no one. She was wearing an old, long hospital gown and a lonely glass of water on the table. John's heart ached at the sight. He felt so sorry for Sarah. "Hello, heroic mother," he said with deliberate cheerfulness. John walked over to the bed where she was lying, her back turned to the wall. "Oh, John," she said, "well, you've come. Is all this for me?" "What's all this for?" It was obvious that she had been crying recently. Her eyes were slightly puffy, reddened. John marveled at the warmth and simplicity with which Sarah greeted him. "That's not all. There's a lot of stuff in the car. I'm not a stranger to you after all. Why are you crying?" "I'm just a little upset. I'm remembering my useless life. I've been running around in rooms lately. I worked in Chicago as a dishwasher. They paid me pennies, and then I couldn't even afford a place to live. I had to sleep in train stations or homeless shelters. Was it scary? I was all alone. And here I see, everyone visits moms with babies. No one needs me," Sarah sobbed. "Your sons need you," John reassured her. "Yes, they do. He's right, of course. But we'll have nowhere to go. My fiancé turned me down. My stepdad kicked me out of the house, said he didn't need any freeloaders. But he's drinking with his buddies, drinking our stuff. It's my mom's apartment. Actually, it was fine when she was alive. And now, oh, my poor sons," and Sarah wept bitterly. John had to lift her up to comfort her. He felt he had to help her. "Look, here's an idea," John suggested. "Let's say I hire you as a manager. And now I'm paying you sick pay and maternity leave. Tomorrow I'll get you a payroll card with your passport and rent an apartment for you and the boys. Are you okay with that?" Oh, Sarah couldn't believe her happiness and froze for a moment, staring at John with wide open eyes. "I'd be happy to work for you. Thank you." Taking her passport from her, John went to the office, where he instructed his assistant to handle Sarah's employment and compensation. Meanwhile, enthusiastic women gathered around Sarah's bunk. "What a man," admired her roommates. "Look, Sarah, hold on to him tightly. Do not miss such a golden man." Come on, girls, I cannot take advantage of his kindness and impose on mistresses. It's not fair. I was just hired, she replied modestly. The neighbors only smiled. It is true what they say, that from the outside you can see what is going on and who likes who. Well, winked the oldest of the women in labor. Sarah just waved her hand and began to look at the presents. The next day, John visited her again to check on the health and well-being of the babies. Besides her, the whole ward was waiting for him. The doctors and patients were wondering what would happen next. Before their eyes, a miracle was happening, as if the audience fell into some movie, where a rich prince takes under the guardianship of a simple girl. And at the end of the story, that John and Sarah, as if did not notice the curious looks, they were absorbed in communication with each other and with the two little babies, which for a couple of days managed to recover and with surprise studied the world around them. John handed her a bank card and a brand new smartphone. Here, as promised. There should be enough there, so don't deny yourself anything. And if you need more, I'll give you some. Just tell me. Our employees receive money twice a month. Payments can be tracked by messages in your phone. I don't even know how to thank you, Sarah was embarrassed. Sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming. It makes me want to pinch myself. Come on, it doesn't cost me much, John said, and people need to be helped. Besides, you and I are already friends, aren't we? Wait till I'm godfather to your boys. By the way, what did you name them? John and Michael, Sarah replied. One in your honor, the other after my dad. He died early, but he was a good father. Thank you. It's my pleasure, John cheered. Okay, I've got to go now. Take care of yourself. I'll come again tomorrow. He said goodbye to the rest of his roommates and walked out, and a crowd of curious people gathered around Sarah again. Sarah, if it's no secret, how much did you get on your card? One of them inquired. I haven't looked yet, Sarah admitted. She picked up her phone, opened the message from the bank, and was stunned. The women came over and peered at the smartphone screen as well. They were filled with curiosity. All were amazed at John's generosity. Wow, that's what I mean. With this money, how much can one live comfortably? Oh, lucky you, Sarah, you got such a great guy, sighed one of the women in labor. Is he married, by the way? I don't know, Sarah sighed and grimaced. In truth, she liked John, of course, but she was afraid to show it, thinking he would see her as a money hunter. And what kind of hunter am I? Thought Sarah Smith with 2 children. But the thought that John might be married made her a little sad. The wardmates noticed this and silently went to their seats. They wanted the poor girl to be happy. Sarah's worries were justified. While John was visiting her in the hospital, Christine was met in one of the restaurants by Marina, the wife of Mike, John's business assistant, the same one who had been making a list of necessary items for Sarah and her children. Why are you out alone without your fiancé? Marina asked. You don't know yet? I left him. Let him bite his elbows now. Who needs him like that? Business nowadays is average, replied Christina. You shouldn't talk about his business like that. Mike said their company is doing well. They got a big order recently. Maybe their luck turned around after that noble deed, Marina informed him. What noble deed? Christina inquired, intrigued by her ex-fiance's sudden career rise. Poor thing, your John gave birth right in his brand new car. Can you believe it? Twins were born, and he visits her every day. Her name is Sarah. I think Marina smiled. Those are his kids. Christina switched to shouting. Why are you yelling? John said the kids aren't his. And it was the first time he'd seen them at all. There you are, you bad girl. Martha was taken aback and walked away, fearing Jessica's tantrums, for which the spoiled rich girl was famous throughout the city. Jessica's inflamed brain was already drawing lewd pictures of John and the stranger. And whose children are they then, if not his? Pissed off badly. Ah, it's Sarah. You turned out to be trickier than me. But the arrogant Jessica could not tolerate such humiliation. So she rushed to the maternity ward to sort things out. Which one of you is Sarah? She shouted as she burst into the room. It's me, Sarah replied. You poor wretched beggar, determined to steal my fiancé away from me. You think you bore him your ugly babies and you're happy. You're such a wretch. Try to come near him. I'll strangle you, yelled the furious bride. My children are not ugly and he is not their father. Get out of here, please, Sarah exclaimed weepingly. I'm not beating off anyone's fiancé. If you don't get out of here yourself, you're on your own. What do you know who my father is? He'd put your kids in an orphanage and you in jail. He'll find something to put you away for. Do you understand me, you thief of other men's men? Get out of here. You died in the wool czar. One of the laboring women got up from the bed and threateningly started to step on Jessica. Are you scaring our babies? Leave her alone, or you'll be out of here upside down, you prairie chicken. Jessica hadn't expected such a rebuff and backed away. looking around like a wounded animal. Slamming the door, Anna ran crying down the hall, escorted by the mocking glances of the staff. On the day of the discharge, John went to pick up Sarah and the children from the maternity hospital. The apartment for them was fully prepared and stocked with everything they needed. He bought flowers and treats for the nursing staff and everyone on the ward. John walked towards the ward with a joyful face. "And Sarah's not here," the roommates said. "She's gone." "Gone how?" Where John's hands dropped from this unexpected news. "Yeah, some crazy blonde girl came by and insulted her in every way possible. Threatened her with jail. So Sarah ran away for good. Good thing we talked her into taking your bank card. Otherwise the girl would have disappeared," the old midwife complained. "So where can we find her?" "It's a big city," John said, clutching his head. "I think I know who frightened Sarah." The women just shrugged. "Why did you hurt Sarah? Who gave you the right to act like that?" Jessica had never seen John so furious before. "That's how you'll know how to fend off other people's suitors," Jessica said capriciously. "What fiances? I was just trying to help her out. Besides, you're kind of not my fiancé. Have you forgotten that you dumped me? I'm poor, ugly to you." John resented her. "Whose kids are the kids then?" Jessica asked snidely. "How would I know?" John exclaimed. "It's none of my business. Are you out of your mind to suspect me? I've never cheated on you. God, I'm so glad I didn't propose to you that day. Maybe it was for the best that my car got towed, and I was late for the restaurant." "Sorry, Bunny." Jessica replaced anger with mercy when she realized she was losing such a lucrative party. "You know I have my reasons for acting like this too. Hormones are playing up. Pregnant women are always like that." "What pregnant women? Are you pregnant?" John wondered. "Yeah, that's why I'm freaking out. I'm not happy with myself." Without blushing, Jessica dialed it up on the spot. "That's news," John exclaimed. "Well, it's something to celebrate." "Come on, I want champagne, the most expensive kind," said Jessica. "But you can't have champagne," he said. "Why is that?" pouted the girl. "It's because alcohol is contraindicated for pregnant women." John marveled at such ignorance. "Right in, I'd forgotten all about it." "See, it's good to have you," she sang softly. After spending the evening with Jessica, John reflected. He was certainly excited about the baby, but he didn't see Jessica as his wife. He felt in his gut that she wasn't right for him, and if he married her, his life would be a nightmare. This thought John shared with his father, Stephen Gregory, who, from what he heard, came just furious. "I don't even think about leaving Jessica. She's the daughter of my main business partner. You will marry her, and he and I will merge. Our capitals will become a powerful corporation, and Jessica's expecting my grandson. If you don't do as I say, I'll disinherit you. And it's too late to back down. You should have used your head. We don't abandon pregnant women and children," the father decided. "All right, Dad, I'll do it. Schedule the wedding in 3 months," John sighed. "That's good," Stephen Gregory soothed. "Too bad your mother didn't live to see that day." John spent the next 2 months secretly trying to find Sarah, but his attempts were fruitless. Sarah had vanished into thin air. Jessica became even more capricious, speculating on a false pregnancy, which sometimes drove him mad. Rejoiced only one Stephen Gregory and spoiled the future daughter-in-law in every possible way. He even ordered for the future grandson of an expensive children's electric car, which were to be delivered from abroad. But time passed, and Jessica's belly did not grow, which worried the future father. John had already managed to study a ton of books on pregnancy and childbirth, and Jessica, to his surprise, wasn't interested. "When's your ultrasound appointment?" he asked his fiancée one day. "I'll go with you. They should already be able to see the arms, legs. It's so interesting, and I've got a lot of questions piling up for the doctor in a week," Jessica muttered. That evening, the pregnant woman called her friend, telling her of her problem. "What am I going to do? How am I going to tell John the first not pregnant? He's going to leave me right away," Jessica hysterical. "I have a miscarriage. It's a piece of cake. If you want, I can help you. I have a doctor I know. He owes my husband a lot of money. He'll make us a miscarriage certificate, and you'll pay the debt for him," advised her friend. "Wow, you're a genius," Jessica exclaimed. It looked like she had been saved. Her mood improved immediately, and she poured herself an impressive glass of red wine to celebrate the deed. And the next morning our cheater went to the corrupt doctor, who arranged everything just right. The case was in the bag. All that remained was to present the news of the miscarriage in such a way as to frighten the gullible John and finally knock him out. Unsuspecting, John sat at his desk and studied the documents. A worried secretary walked in. "John Stephen," she said fearfully, looking at her boss. "The hospital here called to say that your fiancée has had a miscarriage. She is physically in satisfactory condition, but psychologically unstable. Jessica requests that you come for her immediately." "How awful!" exclaimed an astonished John. "So let's go to the hospital immediately." "Wait a minute, though." While you're waiting for the driver from lunch, you could be gone 100 times over. I'll drive myself, John ran out of the office. He didn't wait for the elevator, but went down the emergency stairs, jumping over a step. How could this be? His child was dead, and Jessica must be killing herself with grief. He should be there for her. John, taking his keys out of his pocket on the run, jumped out of the underground parking garage door like a scalded man. After scaring the security guard enough, he didn't remember how he'd ended up on the highway. His SUV was speeding away. Scary images of helpless Jessica and dead babies flashed through John's mind. Tears of grief filled his eyes. He had dreamed of being a father. John didn't notice how he drove into the oncoming lane, overtaking an elderly driver in an old car. But the road was too slippery after the rain, and John was too excited to see the dangerous turn in time. John woke up in a hospital bed. His head and back were hurting badly. A catheter had been placed in his arm, from which a thin tube stretched. A device was beeping nastily next to it. John wanted to sit up, but he couldn't. His legs wouldn't obey him. Not only that, he couldn't feel them at all. "Lie still, patient," the nurse said. Then she turned toward the corridor and shouted, "Doctor, he's awake." "Hello, John." An elderly doctor with glasses looked at the man. "Well, congratulations are in order. Looks like you were born with your shirt on. The car's dented and you're relatively okay. You're a lucky man." The doctor tried to make a joke. "What do you mean I'm fine?" "I can't feel my legs," John said fearfully. "That's the way it should be right now." "But unfortunately not," replied the doctor. "Your legs are inoperative because of the spinal injury. Things should get better after the surgery, but the procedure can only be performed after the body as a whole has recovered. The main thing is that his arms, legs, and head are in place, because, it happens that victims are brought in pieces. The main thing is not to worry, get plenty of rest. It's important now," and the doctor left, leaving orders for the nurse. Soon my father came into the room. His face looked aged and frightened, and there was an addition of gray hair on his head. "Son, I thought I was going to lose you like Mom. What happened? Why were you so driven?" Stephen Gregory asked. "I got word that Jessica had a miscarriage. I was upset and rushed to see her," replied John. The thought of losing his baby made his chest ache. "While you were in a coma, that Jessica of yours found a new suitor and was hanging out with him at nightclubs. She doesn't look like she's grieving for her child. It's entirely possible she had us both fooled. Looks like there was no pregnancy. I had my people take a good look at the doctor who drew a miscarriage on her certificate, and he admitted that he was acting on her orders. Jessica was really after the money, not you. I've completely severed all relations with their family. Those bruises didn't look like they were going to go away that quickly. There's no guarantee her father won't let me down in business too. That bastard hasn't even apologized or visited you once. She's the reason you're here and you could be crippled forever." Stephen Gregory clutched his heart when he heard his father's words. John had lost all interest in life. His eyes dimmed and his face became stony. How come there are people around who don't understand me, John thought. Everyone wants something from me. John no longer cared where he was, what he ate, or what was happening to him. He didn't care about his health at all. That's why he flatly refused any treatments, including physical therapy and exercises. John was always silent, never reacting to anyone. Even when he was brought home, where close friends and colleagues gathered to meet him, he did not care. He sat slumped in his wheelchair with a detached face. A month passed. It was time to prepare for surgery. Stephen Gregory, of course, was most worried about his son's fate. "The doctors say you should do special exercises. It will help you overcome post-operative complications," the father said. "I don't want to. I don't see the point. I'll do just fine as I am." "No one wanted me healthy, and they didn't want me disabled," John replied despondently. Stephen Gregory saw how depressed he was. His father had hired the best therapists for him, but they had all failed. John simply refused to communicate with them. They had over a dozen professional caregivers with medical degrees, but they never lasted more than a week. John's temper had completely deteriorated. No one could endure his caustic remarks and refusal to obey the worker for long. "Take care of your son yourself," shouted the last of the nurses, whom John had pissed off. "You've completely lost your minds. I'm not your slave. I'm not going to take this kind of treatment," and left, slamming the door. Rumors of a harmful invalid quickly spread in the narrow circles of medical workers, and no one else wanted to care for John at any price. This function fell to Stephen Gregory and the elderly housekeeper, who already had a lot to do around the house. Desperate to find a decent caregiver, John's father placed an ad in the local newspaper. There were a lot of applicants, elderly grandmothers who needed care themselves, dashing-looking girls with colorful makeup, and heavy drinkers who could barely stand on their feet, and even a homeless man. Stephen Gregory was quick to turn them all away. One day there was a loud knock at their house. On the threshold stood a modest, pretty woman who at first sight inspired Stephen Gregory trust, and he invited her into the house. "Hello, are you the one looking for a nurse for a sick man?" she asked. "I don't have a medical degree, but I took care of my grandmother. I can give injections, perform hygiene procedures, feed, take walks, and fill leisure time so that the person is not bored. But I won't be able to stay here overnight for family reasons. Here's my resume, take a look." "Good afternoon. I'm so glad you responded. I think you'd be a good fit for us. Come on, I'll introduce you to my son. He's 30 years old, and he's a good man. Only nervous because of his illness, Stephen Gregory was so pleased to see the nurse that he forgot to ask her name. He knocked on the door leading to John's room. "Who else is there? What do you want?" came the angry voice of Stephen Gregory. The nurse came into the room. When John saw her, he froze with shock at first, and then tears came to his eyes. "Sarah, have you come? I've been looking for you. Where have you been?" Sarah had and ran over to John. She sat down on her knees in front of his chair and began to feel his stiff legs. "Johnny, what's wrong? Can't you walk?" "How can you?" Anna exclaimed and cried. When Stephen Gregory saw his son's face partly clear, he breathed a sigh of relief. "How do you know each other so well?" he asked. "It's a long story." Dad John finally smiled. "I'll tell you about it later sometime." For the first time in 3 months, he was in high spirits. His father decided not to disturb them, so he simply went to his room, ordering them to serve a dinner tonight. It was necessary to respect the long-awaited guest. "What a sumptuous table," marveled Sarah as she entered the dining room that evening with John, who was cheerfully spinning the wheels of his wheelchair. "It's to show how pleased we are with you." Sarah Stephen Gregory perked up. "Thank you." "It's a pleasure," she rejoiced. "It's even kind of embarrassing to take money from you now." "You go ahead, don't make it up," John replied. "You need the money. I don't need you changing my pants for free. Every labor should be paid for. Especially labor like this, okay? I won't argue. Just don't you worry, John," Sarah said worriedly. "You're not supposed to worry before surgery. Or have you forgotten what we agreed? So did you agree to the operation?" Stephen asked Gregory excitedly. "Of course, we need to get back on our feet quickly," John said, and looked at Sarah, who was squeezing his hand tightly. Stephen Gregory realized that his son liked her and was a beneficial influence on him. That reassured him. A mild infatuation never hurt anyone, yet he thought, and invited everyone to the table. While John was busy working on his health, Jessica had managed to dump another beau who she thought was unworthy of her. Finding out that John was on the mend and that the hated Sarah was living next door to him in his house, jealous Jessica decided to get back at them. She took a pen and a piece of paper and wrote an anonymous letter stating that Sarah was a dangerous adventuress and wealth hunter who had gotten John pregnant on purpose a year ago and bore him twins, and now she is going to become the mistress of the house and the whole business. And Stephen Gregory himself, Sarah plans to give him to a nursing home to keep him out of the way. The next morning, the letter was sent by courier to Stephen Gregory. Upon reading the anonymous letter, the father was furious. He stormed into Sarah's room. "Is it true that you had children with John?" he asked angrily, glaring his eyes. "Yes, it just so happened," Sarah replied calmly. "Maybe you also like my son?" he asked wryly. "Yes," she admitted honestly. "But John doesn't know anything about it, so that's why you came here, to marry him off," Stephen yelled. "I wanted our money, eh? You'll get by. That's what I just came to work," exclaimed Sarah. "Get out of my house." And Stephen Gregory pointed to the door. Sarah was not allowed to say goodbye to John. There was nothing left for her to do but leave this house. "Where's Sarah?" John asked when he arrived in his wheelchair for breakfast. "I kicked her out," said his father. "What do you want that Anashenko for? There's no need for us to get inbred with her yet." "Oh, really?" John exclaimed. "You've got yourself a baron, and you have no right to control other people's destinies. You once asked me to marry Jessica. And how did that turn out? Look what happened to me." John took offense and went off to the garden near the house. His father remained seated at the table, reading the letter. Half an hour later, he went to apologize to his son and confess that perhaps he had believed the anonymous letter for nothing. But he didn't find John. A search was organized in the street, and even the police were involved. But the stroller tracks broke off on the road. "What have I done?" "You old fool," Stephen Gregory clutched his head and cried. In the evening, he found Sarah's resume where she had left her address, and the next morning he went there. The house was on the very edge of town. Stephen Gregory knocked on the door. He was opened by an elderly landlady who immediately realized who stood before her. The Smith family. All the details of their life were known to everyone in town. The grandmother nodded silently at the room where Sarah and the children were seated. "What do you want?" she asked when she saw the offending man enter. Stephen Gregory was silent. He couldn't find the words. An apology. Besides, his gaze was fixed on two chubby-cheeked babies who were walking amusingly while lying in a crib. "How cute," he said as he approached the children. "I'd forgotten how beautiful babies can be. I'm getting old. I've forgotten how it was when I was young. I've lost my head for business." "I'm sorry," Sarah snapped at you. "I got an anonymous letter with all sorts of nasty things written about you, so I freaked out. I hurt your feelings. I didn't know what I was talking about. So you had a baby. You had a baby with your son. It's not my business. My business is to provide a decent life for my grandchildren." "All right," she smiled. "But these are not your grandchildren. They're from my fiancée, who's long gone, and John just helped me when I was in dire need. You raised a decent man. I'm the one who should be thanking you for him." When Sarah told the details of her life, Stephen Gregory was ashamed. "Who took care of the little ones while you were working here?" asked Grandma Martha, the landlady. "I owe her a great deal," said Sarah. "So that's it. Pack up with the kids and back to our place of permanent residence. I've got some not-so-good news, though. My John is missing. He went off somewhere in a wheelchair. Never came back," said Stephen Gregory. "Missing how?" Sarah said worriedly. "We have to find him, don't we? What if something happened to him? What if he needs help?" "What kind of wheelchair-bound invalid are you talking about?" Grandma Martha heard everything and decided to cut into the conversation. "Isn't it a young man with black hair and a red jacket?" "Yes, that's him," Stephen and Sarah shouted in unison. "So he's staying with Peter, our vagabond. He's so clever. He's got a new tenant. He fixed Peter's television. Yesterday I took the iron to him for repair. Now the iron works as good as new." Sarah ran out into the yard first. Stephen Gregory could hardly keep up with her when they burst into the old shack, not without a knock. Out of breath from running, they found John alive and well. He was sitting there fixing an old electric stove. "How did you frighten me, John?" Father exclaimed. "So you almost gave your father a heart attack," Sarah said menacingly. "Well, how can you be such a slacker? You've got surgery coming up. We were worried you'd drive us crazy," Dad said. "Sarah, hold me, or I won't serve him now." John laughed loudly and happily. He realized that his two favorite people had found common ground, and it made him happy. "Yeah, I want to go home," he said. "Where are John and Alex?" "They're home. They're being looked after." "Don't worry," Sarah reassured him. As they walked noisily into Stephen's house, Anna, the housekeeper, splashed her hands together. She was delighted to see the sullen house come alive again. Sarah had allocated the brightest, warmest rooms for the little ones. John personally supervised all the preparations. The father rejoiced at his son's transformation. When evening came and John was playing with the children, Sarah quietly approached Stephen Gregory and hugged him. "Thank you for everything," Stephen Gregory, Sarah whispered softly. "I'll tell you a secret. John asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Now that's news." "Call me Daddy," Sarah Stephen Gregory said affectionately. A few months later, John was already moving around the house, albeit with a stick, but on his own 2 feet, and gave instructions to a team of workers who were building a warm gazebo in the garden for winter walks with the kids. The operation was a success. In addition, the problem was not as serious as the doctors had feared. That's why John recovered quite quickly. They had the wedding right at the manor house. They didn't invite many guests. They invited only close friends and relatives. The young people were happy. There were good wishes, loud toasts, and of course shouts of bitter. In the midst of the festivities, Jessica showed up uninvited. She was no longer that beautiful girl, but looked depressed and devastated. Everyone fell silent, expecting a trick from the self-loving girl. What insolence was heard from all sides. How dare she come here? "I apologize for disturbing your idyll," Jessica said with her head down. "I came to apologize to all of you. John, Sarah, I sincerely wish you happiness. Forgive me if you can." Jessica held a small, neatly wrapped gift in her hands, which she placed with trembling hands with the rest of the presentations. John looked disdainfully at her offering. He wanted nothing from the one who had caused his family so much pain. The vow of silence was interrupted by Sarah. She was the one who knew better than anyone what it was like to be a social outcast. "Jessica, I don't know about John, but I forgive you. Today is such a happy day, and I don't want to overshadow it. Thank you for the gift. It takes courage to do that, to admit your mistakes. Come on in, make yourself at home. You know everything here better than I do," and Sarah smiled. Jessica, not expecting this kind of participation, cried openly. It was as if something in her soul had burst and the dam of accumulated shame and grief had burst. It was clear that something very bad had happened in her life. Sarah came out from behind the desk and put her arms around her, pulling her close. "Come on, are you going to tell us everything?" she said quietly and pulled Jessica with her. She didn't resist. Obediently, she followed Sarah, realizing that she could get help here. As much as John didn't want to see his ex-fiancée, her state of mind shook him, and he agreed to listen to her. After drinking some soothing drops, Jessica began to pour out her soul. "My father died suddenly of a heart attack a month ago," she began her story. "My mom and I were left all alone. The company's fortunes began to deteriorate because of my father's departure. Investors were afraid to cooperate with us. And then Victor appeared, our savior. I trusted him. He courted me so nicely, said he was a top manager of a big company. He drove an expensive car, gave me luxurious gifts. My mother loved him and wanted him for a son-in-law. Our house was open to him at any time of day. And then Vitya offered to sell the company and invest all my father's money in cryptocurrencies. He promised that now it was growing in value and you could make a lot of money on the difference when reselling it. I transferred all the money to the right wallet, just like he said. I trusted him. And the next day Victor disappeared, moved out of the hotel, and his phone was unavailable. We realized Victor was a fraud. Turns out he even had a rented suit. He robbed us blind. My mom and I had our house foreclosed on. I still have some money left in my account, but it'll be gone soon, and they won't hire me anywhere. They say I don't have experience. That scoundrel, and Jessica showed a photo of her boyfriend on her phone. It's to die for Sarah couldn't help herself. So this is my ex-fiancé Vitya, who swindled the last of my money and ran away when he found out I was pregnant. Now that's a coincidence. Yes, you and I, Jessica, are now unfortunate friends. By the way, I know where he might be holed up. I heard an address he gave to a cab driver once. Let's see if we can get your money back. In the meantime, stay with your mom at our place. I think there's plenty of room for everyone. Can't we just stay friends? I don't have any real girlfriends, Jessica said. And believe me, I've changed. I know what it's like to have no money and rich people looking at you funny. What kind of a fool was I to act like that? You certainly were, Sarah smiled. And they laughed. And then they talked for a long time about something. A strong friendship was budding between them. John decided not to disturb them and went to see his sons, whom he missed very much. The next morning, Jessica wrote a police report on Victor and attached a photo of the fraudster and bank statements to the case file. For his part, John involved an experienced detective. Together, they found Victor's trail. And in time, he was already processing the next victim. The money was returned to Jessica. She was happy and bought for her mother and herself a small, cozy house, already much more modest than it was. John, will you let me be your business partner? You're the one I want to entrust the remaining capital to, Jessica asked. Deal. Partner John smiled and looked at his ex-fiancée. He no longer resented her. Jessica had really changed, becoming softer in character and easier to talk to. In addition, her favorite friend Sarah had a positive influence on her. Every evening, John hurried home from work, where his large family was waiting for him. One evening, Peter greeted him and continued trimming the bushes. He was the same hobo who had picked up a freezing John by the roadside when he had run away from home. Peter proved to be an excellent gardener. The garden had been transformed by his arrival. Well done, Peter, John said. By the way, your house is almost ready. You can move in a couple of days. As soon as John stepped on the threshold of the house, Caesar came running toward him. On his neck hung a note. The dog wagged his tail and spun around happily, so John had to do his best to get the strange message away from him. When John unfolded the note, he saw the words that every loving man dreams of. You're going to be a daddy again soon. And in the dining room, there was a large family waiting for him. A happy father, a wife, 2 sons, a faithful dog, and someone else whose arrival everyone was eagerly awaiting. Leaf fall. How Melissa loved it. The wind swirls over the ground, and then yellow and red leaves carpet the autumn ground with color. There's silence all around. Only the rustle of leaves stirs the ear. It is still warm in summer. The sun is shining brightly. Gentle puffy clouds are floating in the clear sky. The young woman sighs heavily. Once she could run and toss up colorful leaves, but now she was confined to a wheelchair. She recalled a recent conversation with the head doctor of the surgical department. Henry had explained in detail to Melissa that she had literally been put back together piece by piece after the accident. The injuries were so severe that the prognosis was still questionable. Not only were her bones damaged, but also her internal organs. The doctor told her and her husband to definitely go to church and pray. It's a miracle she survived. Her husband, on the other hand, only suffered scratches. Jonathan was driving, and the investigation showed that he was the one who caused the accident. The man failed to control the car because he fell asleep. Melissa was also dozing when the car had hit a roadside pole at full speed. Now she had a new course of treatment ahead of her, but now the doctors sent her home for rehabilitation. Jonathan drove his wife in a wheelchair down the alley along the hospital buildings. He looked sullen and guilty. "Don't be upset," Melissa told him softly. "I don't hold a grudge against you. I hope you recover." Jonathan nodded his head and sighed noisily. "I just don't know. You need a nurse now, don't you? I have to work. How are we going to get by without money? But I'll have the first group of disability. That's how we're going to pay for caregiving. There's also a $100,000 settlement. That's good. We're broke." It was the hardest time of Melissa's life. She couldn't do anything on her own, and every movement caused her unbearable pain. The young woman hired a nurse, an attentive, patient woman of her age. Her name was Lillian, and she had a lot of experience and real expertise in caring for such patients. Day after day, Lillian's caregiver pedantically followed the doctor's recommendations. In the morning, hygiene, exercises, breakfast. Then she would take Melissa for a walk. Of course, the patient liked to walk. Outdoors, she could feel like a living person. Melissa loved it when the fresh wind blew on her face and cold, wet snowflakes fell on her palms. She couldn't feel anything in her legs, though, and she couldn't even move them. Henry had told her that there was hope, though, and that eventually she would be able to walk. Melissa was losing faith in that with each passing day. Her nurse reassured her and told her that too little time had passed, so she needed to work hard every day and continue her treatments. Her fortitude impressed the young woman. In the afternoon, Lillian would give Melissa a massage, and in the evening they would go for water treatments. She took pearl baths and charcut showers. Jonathan was at work all day long. At first he spent a lot of time with his wife, but then he became distant and came to their apartment later and later. After the nurse left, Melissa was helpless. She was afraid to talk to her husband because he would get irritated and respond rudely to any request. Very often at night she was thirsty, probably from the large number of pills. Although Lillian left a glass of water on the bedside table, it quickly ran out. One day Melissa asked her husband to help her and bring her a new drink, to which he unleashed a torrent of profanity and insults. "I've had enough of you," he shouted. "Helpless chicken. I want to sleep all day at work and here to serve you. Can't you think of everything when you have a nurse with you?" Jonathan said all this to his wife without getting up from the sofa. He still hadn't brought her any water. Melissa justified her husband's behavior by being tired and worried about their life. Only in this she was deeply mistaken. For a couple of days later, Melissa overheard the terrible conversation that he and his mother were having with each other. The interlocutors thought she was sound asleep because she had taken sleeping pills. They were not shy. Jonathan said Hilary. "From visiting her in the village. She has a house there, and Sister Martha can look after her. She lives sort of in the neighborhood, doesn't work, has more time on her farm. And in the end, it'll be cheaper. A nurse is expensive." "It's not like Melissa's going to die," Jonathan said. "I talked to Dr. Henry, and he said she doesn't stand a chance." "That's true. He gave her a lot of reassurance that she wouldn't do anything. Wouldn't it be better if she did?" "I agree," Jonathan said. "It's a tough time. So that's what I'm telling you. Maybe when Melissa dies, you can have her house in the village. Her parents left it to her. Then I'll give you some money and you can buy yourself a nice 2-bedroom. And have kids again. At least I'll have grandchildren. Now she's lying here like a log, with no future." "Okay," Hilary said. "We'll call Kevin tomorrow, and I'll tell him to take my sister. It's a lot of money for this nurse and procedures, all paid for. It's a shame about the money." Of course, my mother-in-law agreed. "I was already against your marriage. I didn't raise you to look at a wretched woman. I want a happy life for my son. And there are no prospects here." Melissa could hardly hold back her tears when she heard that conversation. Everything inside her was sobbing. What on earth is being done? How can they be so cruel? Jonathan is the one who crippled her. It's all his fault. What a betrayal. She managed to love him after all his deeds. All night long the young woman sobbed into her pillow. And in the morning, when Lillian came and put her in the chair, she decided that she would not stay in this world any longer. And while her nurse was in the kitchen preparing breakfast and lunch, Melissa drank everything in her medicine cabinet. But the experienced Lillian knew what was wrong and called an ambulance in time. Melissa was pumped out. Jonathan and his mother took advantage of her suicide attempt and quickly called the village where her sister lived. "Hey Martha," Jonathan said into the phone. "I can't keep an eye on her all the time. I'm away during the day and at night I want to sleep. That's how your sister is going to end up dead. So if you want to see her alive, take her to the village." Martha was the eldest in the family and she agreed without hesitation. As Melissa shook in the back seat of the car on the way to the village, she thought back over her life. Pictures of her happy childhood floated before her eyes. A favored village near a large mixed forest, where they ran as children every day. Caring and loving parents Brandon and Patricia, a strong married couple, economic and hospitable. The Vasilievs' home always smelled of flavorful pies. On the table were treats from their own vegetable garden. Brandon cut down the house himself, big, comfortable, strong. Father loved his daughters very much, always called them beauties. Nature really gifted them with beautiful appearance. Both of them were light blonde, with blue eyes and correct facial features. They had grown up, and to their outer beauty had been added softness, femininity, features inherited from their mother. Melissa remembered her mother stroking her head before bedtime and telling her wonderful stories. Her voice was heartfelt and calm. A mother could convey useful things to her daughters without degrading their dignity. Thus, surrounded by the love of their parents, Martha and Melissa lived a carefree and happy life. But then a great misfortune happened. Their parents died. Ridiculously, but instantly. The two of them were digging a hole on the property for a septic tank. Natural gas escaped, and they both suffocated. Melissa and Martha were now adults and had graduated from high school. But the tragedy took its toll on them. Being without parents is hard at any age, and when you're young, it causes confusion, hopelessness, and despair. There is no readiness for independent life yet, and you want to lean on someone. There is no experience and worldly wisdom. There was no one to ask for advice and help. It was good that Martha and Melissa had been friends since childhood and supported each other in every situation. They were already adults, so the guardianship was not interested in them. The sisters began to lead independent lives. They were hard-working from childhood, and so they were engaged in the household and friendship. They lived soul to soul until Martha fell in love. From the school bench, she was courted by her classmate Leo, red-haired, curly-haired, modest and good-natured guy. He was the first to come to the aid of the sisters when he learned of their family tragedy, and literally every day came to them to help. After all, in a rural house, need a man's strength to clean the stable and draw water from the well. Somewhere something to nail, somewhere to dig beds. Leo, of course, had a burning eye. If the boy had been given a free hand, he would have sat with her all day long, holding her hand. Martha was partial to him, too, though she didn't show her feelings directly. But it was obvious that she liked the boy. Soon Melissa began to notice that the lovers were looking for a private place to be alone. The clever girl, under a plausible pretext, left the house, then in the library, then to former classmates' girlfriends. Tender dates led to the fact that Martha became pregnant, and as usual, they got married. Parents played the young couple a wedding, a wide and generous, rustic wedding. Their house was on the next street over, Melissa recalled. They set tables in the yard that were bursting with rustic treats, potatoes generously sprinkled with dill, fried pork, lard, green onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, and popular salads, crab and olivier. All simple, but delicious. What else do you need for a rustic wedding? The groom's family had their own moonshine, and wine, grape, cherry, currant, all natural. Melissa remembered the tart taste of that August night. The scents of herbs and ripe apples wafted around, and then she wished she had been as successful. And the wedding was still going on. The adults began to sing songs, and the young ran to the river. How beautiful it was all around. The long-awaited coolness had descended on the earth, and the water was still warm. Everyone was splashing, joking, and laughing. There were few young people in the village. Many went to the city to study and stayed there. But they came to their parents. That's why there were a lot of young guests at the wedding. It was only later, on weekdays, that the village became empty, and only the echo of barking dogs and passing birds resounded in the neighborhood. Martha and Leo moved into his parents' house. It had 2 entrances, and they were assigned one half, despite their independent married life. They didn't leave Melissa behind, they went to help. And soon an official from the city came to their village to recruit social workers to care for elderly citizens. Melissa went straight to the village council in hopes of getting a job. Hilary, a lady of about 45, looked her upside down and invited her to sit across from her. "What is your education?" she asked. 11 grades, she replied. "I studied without fail. My diploma is good." "That you studied well is nice. But here's the thing to work with the elderly. You know, with age people become irritable, nervous. Can you get along with them?" "I know them all. It's a small village. You can't treat them without respect. And I was brought up to respect my elders." "Well, Melissa, let's get a job. I can see you're a serious and responsible person." So the girl got a job and coped with her duties admirably. The old people loved and waited for her. The store in the village is far away, and lonely people need fresh food every day. And to clean the house, to wash the floors, to apply water, a lot of things are needed. That is why the elderly people were grateful to Melissa and social services for such care. They did not want to leave here. They had been born and they wanted to stay until the last. They were happy that such care was organized for them. Melissa herself didn't want to move anywhere. Everything here was her own. But one day Hilary called and asked Melissa to come to town. There was a competition among social workers. They had to show their talents. The chairman said Melissa could sing and dance well. "Me, Hilary?" The girl said no. "I can only sing Russian folk songs and dances in a simple way. Did anyone teach me to compete? Isn't there anyone better in town?" "So, my dear, they are looking for nuggets of talent to be bright and interesting," objected Hilary. "Don't cross me. Come up with a number, even if it's simple, but with songs and dances. Maybe you won't be chosen for the contest, but you'll perform for the department. Protect your honor." Melissa wasn't used to arguing with her elders, so she accepted the leader's offer without complaint. She hadn't been in the city for a long time, almost 6 months. The last time she'd gone to the clinic for a checkup. And having arrived there, she was surprised by the big changes. In the center, there were several new stores with glass windows, and a new theater had been built. That's where the contestants were selected. The director of the social service center and her 2 deputies were sitting in the hall with an important look, and young girls social workers crowded backstage. Each of them had prepared a number. Melissa's performance was considered banal and simple, and she was not accepted to the contest. She was only worried for nothing. But that day it was impossible to go home. The bus had left. It only made 1 trip a day. Melissa sat down on a bench in the theater square and called the hotel to rent a room until tomorrow. They had booked a 2-bedroom with only 1 bed for her. The girl decided to walk around the city and look around. After all, she hadn't been here often. Walking leisurely through the central square, Melissa didn't notice the lilac evening descending on the land. She stepped out onto the stone sidewalk that ran along the embankment and looked out at the river. The blue water reflected the light of the lanterns. There wasn't a soul around, and only one man sat pensively on a bench. As Melissa passed him, he suddenly said, "Why are you so young alone, afraid of a passerby? It's late." "Yes, I am rarely in the city, so I couldn't deny myself the pleasure of walking its streets," she replied. "And what do you find interesting in our provincial town?" asked the stranger with surprise. "I find a lot of things. Here, after all, civilization, parks, squares, after all, stands with ice cream. And we have only 2 stores for the whole village. Dirt roads, forest trails. I love my hometown, but I'm not averse to city comforts." "So why don't you sit down?" A young man looked up at her. There was nothing remarkable about him. And if it weren't for the night and the empty street, Melissa would hardly have noticed him. "Yes, I'm a country girl, not used to your city life. All my life I walk barefoot on the grass, and in summer I disappear in the woods and rivers," the girl admitted. "But why are you sitting here alone?" "So my own mother kicked me out of the house. I did not please her. I do everything wrong. Now she's asleep, and I'm wandering around town." Melissa felt sorry for the stranger. "But if you'll vouch for yourself, let's go back to my place." "I mean, sleep over. Sleep over, pay the difference, and take the other bed? I've already booked a room. Let's go, the man agreed. My name is Jonathan. What's your name? I'm Melissa. It's a rare name. These days it's Angelina, Bogdan, and Brittany. And here it's just Melissa. But what did your parents call you? I have no complaints. I like my name, smiled the girl. It's a beautiful name. I haven't heard it for a long time. Jonathan got up from the bench and gave Melissa his hand. Together they walked to the hotel. The receptionist suggested that the man pay for the room, and he gladly agreed, depositing the money for Melissa, which embarrassed her. They went to bed at midnight in their clothes. In the morning, Melissa woke up to someone kissing her. She opened her eyes and tried to pull away from Jonathan, but he was much stronger. When it was over, Melissa cried bitterly. Well, what do you want? It's no big deal, the man justified himself. You're the one who called me. So I felt sorry for you. I told you I didn't have a place to sleep. I've never been with anyone before. How could you? What's the big deal? A man and a woman in the same room. That's how it could have happened, Jonathan continued. I'm going to report you, Melissa said sharply. Write it down to whomever you want. Jonathan grinned. Who's going to believe you? You invited a man to your room and then you're going to file a report. That's ridiculous. Melissa sighed tiredly and sat up on the bed. She looked at the guy's face and said, You have a mean soul. You took advantage of a naive girl and you're playing the hero. She got up from the bed, went to take a shower, and when she came out, she saw Jonathan stomping around the front door. Well, leave your phone number. I'm not a pig. Let's go out like people, he suggested. That's not much of a hunt, Melissa shrugged. Don't pretend, the young man said indignantly. Let me help you carry your things to the bus. But don't take offense. Listen, you're really like this by nature. I want to humanly, but the charms of the name I do not throw to you. Jonathan did follow her to the bus station and carried her bag with her things. He was persistent and Melissa gave in, leaving him her cell phone. The man called her for the first 2 weeks, always asking for a date in the city. Melissa said no. Then he stopped bothering her, and the girl lived her normal life. She didn't even tell her sister about the incident so as not to upset her. However, a month later, Melissa realized that she was pregnant. Not knowing what to do, she dialed Jonathan's number. Is this the gift you have in store for me? It must be revenge, he said. Why are you so stupid? There are plenty of women around, and he chose a countrywoman. Satisfied, the man mumbled into Henry's phone. What do you want me to do? I'm not getting rid of the kids, it's a sin. Melissa retorted. Well, if it's a sin, let's get married and have a baby. My mother, Emily, wants grandchildren for a long time. It doesn't matter if you or someone else gives me heirs. Maybe it's for the best. Or I'd never marry. Especially with country blood and milk. Healthy offspring. Can you give birth? City people are all sick. They have a lot of diseases, Jonathan reasoned. So pack your bags and come to the city, I'll meet you. But you have to let me know in advance. All night long, Melissa thought about her fate. She didn't want to live with a man she didn't love, but she didn't want to leave her child without a father either. The young woman gathered everything she needed, prayed in front of the iconostasis, and went to bed. In the morning, she went to the city. As promised, Jonathan met her at the station and immediately took her to his home to his future mother-in-law, Emily. Melissa was startled right from the doorstep. The woman was unattractive, short, crooked-legged, round-faced, and squinty-eyed. On top of that, Emily had an unpleasant, squeaky voice. When she spoke, it sounded like someone was driving metal over glass. The acquaintance was very unpleasant for Melissa. The woman picked on her every word and movement. She said the wrong thing, sat the wrong way, looked the wrong way. In general, she glared at the girl every minute. Without ceremony, Emily told the young people that she would live with them. She sold her apartment and put the money in an account. It'll do them good. After all, young people do not know how to do anything now, and everyone needs order, she said admonitively. She ordered Jonathan and Melissa to share a room. The next morning, Emily said bluntly, "You go find yourself a job. We're not going to feed you. Even though you're carrying my grandchild, you have to provide for yourself. I'm not a millionaire to support you in your old age." Melissa asked Hillary for the same job in the city. And that Hillary found her a place. "I'm all set," she announced happily to Jonathan's mom, Emily. "That's great," she smiled. "Who's going to cook? Separate from us. You cook for yourself. Well, maybe I will give you fruits or vegetables and the rest is all on your own. Don't come to me and my son for money. We're only taking you in because you're pregnant, and I'll charge you for utilities. You'll be using them light, water, gas. They're not free. Don't expect charity from me." Emily's greed knew no bounds. Melissa went to the marriage registration with Jonathan herself, having bought herself a dress and a bouquet. There were no guests at all. Jonathan wouldn't even let her friends come. "You live with us now, and by our rules," he told Melissa. "We don't want strangers. If you want to talk to your friend, you can come to her, but I forbid you to invite her." "How unhuman are you?" The girl couldn't stand it. "Well, go where it's human. Who'll take you in when you're pregnant? I don't know who would want you." In the future, Jonathan and Melissa's life was hard to call married. She felt like a total stranger in their home. The slanted glances of her mother-in-law and her constant nagging drove the girl to a frenzy. Once Emily so long mocked the young woman that she ran out of the house and stayed out all night. It was summer, but the weather was cold. Melissa caught a cold and ended up in the hospital. As a result, she had a miscarriage. Not only was she physically ill, but Jonathan and her mother were harassing her. "We took you in, and you didn't save our offspring. You ran off to some unknown place." The mother-in-law nodded, ranting to the whole hospital. "She brought you some fruit." She tossed a net of apples carelessly onto the nightstand. Melissa silently turned her back to the wall and felt hot tears burning her face. Melissa never touched her mother-in-law's treat. The apples seemed poisoned by the poison that came from Emily's soul. A few months later, there was an accident, followed by a terrible conversation where mother and son discussed Melissa as an unnecessary thing. It was disgusting. And now Melissa was on her way to her ancestral home. Jonathan gave her a dry goodbye, and he didn't even get out of the car to help Martha put his wife in the stroller. Melissa was greatly relieved when her sister brought her into the bedroom. The young woman smiled. Everything was just as it had been before, her childhood drawings and the big pink teddy bear on the bed. Martha had cleaned the entire house, and its smells brought a peacefulness to Melissa's soul. Insulted and humiliated, she cried quietly. "Thank you, sis, for caring," Melissa sobbed. "What would I do without you?" Martha put her arm around Melissa's shoulders and sobbed. "What kind of people are they? Married them. Now they want to get rid of them." "I haven't told you everything," the young woman sighed. And she told her sister the truth about the night at the hotel. "Why didn't you say anything, silly? You could see right away that the man was rotten. Why did you get involved with him? We could have helped you and Leo. We'd have helped you raise your child. Better alone than with such a despicable man." "That's right," Melissa agreed. "I was wrong. I didn't see the meanness in him. I thought he was just a weak man, like a man no one wanted. But he and his mother were in cahoots, and it got to the point where they'd be happy to dance on my bones at my grave. And they are not poor. They don't need anything. They live in a comfortable apartment, dress fashionably, eat well, but they dream about the death of a man so that they have more money." "Melissa, don't worry. What happens now happens now. We'll help you with everything. When Leo comes back, we'll be better off. I just wish I could wait for him," Martha sputtered and sat down on a stool. But her hopes were not to be realized. One day, the connection with Leo was cut off for several weeks. The woman had been worried sick, calling and writing to every authority. It seemed to Melissa that Sister Martha would go mad. She loved her husband Leo very much, and had 3 children by him. They lived peacefully, amicably, cheerfully. They got along with his parents, waited for Leo to come home together. Then came the sad news. The whole village gathered for the funeral. The women were in tears, and the men were standing, freezing in their hats. They were all of age and had great respect for the late Matthew. He was a good man and a great professional, worked in the village motor pool. There used to be all sorts of things, SUVs and tractors. Now it's just 2 old dump trucks and a van. But everyone used Matthew's services and brought their personal vehicles in for repairs, and he never turned anyone down. He realized that in such remoteness from the city you can't do without cars. Leo's parents grieved for a long time. Martha had become very thin and was not herself. The children all circled around Melissa. Almost all day long they were in her house. She did homework with them, helped prepare meals. Martha would come, put her sister in the stroller, silently feed the chickens and ducks, and then come to the outskirts and stare at the woods and fields, weeping quietly. None of her relatives touched her. They understood that it took time to get over such grief. Slowly the woman withdrew a little, began to be included in the household and in the upbringing of children. Days flowed again with their succession. The forest was ablaze with bright colors. The last days of September brought warmth to the village. Melissa was often in the woods in the afternoons. She wanted to be alone, to breathe the crystal air, to enjoy the silence. One day she met a strange man on the forest path. The girl was surprised strangers didn't come here. "Halt," she shouted, limping, to the stranger in the back, and he turned around. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a bronze-tanned, strong-willed face. "Hello, are you on patrol around the property?" he asked peacefully. "Hello." "No," Melissa smiled. "It's just rare to see anyone in our forest." "Aren't you afraid? What if I have bad intentions? And you're alone in the middle of nowhere?" "What could I be afraid of in my position?" Melissa nodded at the stroller. "You're wrong. There are worse things to do. I'm looking for Martha Smith. You don't know her?" "I don't know her. She's my own sister." "Oh, great. I'm a friend of her husband Leo's. I came to visit you." "You knew Leo well?" "Well, let's go quickly. We really need you because your stories tell us he's alive." On the way, Rick, as the man introduced himself, told Melissa that he'd been wounded in the war. He told her that he and Leo were friends. Leo's parents listened with bowed heads, and the children kept their eyes on the man, eagerly catching his every word. "Your father, son, and husband was a hero. And he told me a lot about you. I know that Samantha likes to sleep before dinner," he said, glancing affectionately at a skinny girl of 9. "And the younger ones, Peter and Cheryl, go to the river in the summer without being asked." That's right, the children chorused, one and all with fiery red hair and freckled faces. "That's how I remember Leo too, with his cheerful freckles and bright green eyes. They are the epitome of him and all in his father." The man lived his life for a reason. He left such children, Rick thought to himself. He was with you all the way, wasn't he? Of course he wanted to come back, the man sighed, but it didn't come true. "So I came here to help you. That was our agreement. He must have sensed his own demise. He asked me to come to help his wife, his parents, his children. So, Martha, give me everything you need for the household. Don't be shy, tell me. I'm a carpenter. I can cook a little, and I'm not afraid of any labor." "Thank you. It's a little cramped in here, though. But you can stay with Melissa's sister, Martha. It's a big house, and she won't be so scared." "She doesn't want to move in with us. She's kind of shy," Rick smiled broadly, glancing toward Melissa. "I don't even think that girl's afraid of hell. Let's go." Melissa beckoned him to follow. Rick hefted the travel bag onto his powerful shoulders and followed. He watched as the young girl deftly handled the wheelchair. When he reached Melissa's house, Rick couldn't contain his admiration. What a beauty. The man admired the carved ornaments on the structure. The hands of a master. Who has such golden hands? "My late father's," Melissa replied. "That was a master." Rick's eyes sparkled with delight. The young woman looked up at him and marveled at the mighty strength of her new acquaintance. For some reason, she was not afraid of the presence of a strange man in the house. On the contrary, she felt protected. Every morning, the girl went out in a wheelchair into the yard and watched with amusement as the stern, silent Rick fed the birds in their backyard. He wasn't squeamish about making breakfast for Melissa. However, the man made it a condition that he would buy all the food himself and with his own money. He did not accept any objections. For the first time in her life, Melissa caught herself thinking that it felt good to accept help. Rick's whole demeanor was calm and eager to be helpful. He took her into the woods every day, and Melissa showed him the places where they had played with their peers as children. Immediately, a smile appeared on her face. They chose different routes, admired nature, picked mushrooms and berries. It was also customary for them to go for an evening walk, have dinner on the riverbank and talk. It was the only thing that made Melissa feel so unfit to be a woman. Ah, if only she could be the same. How much happiness she could give this man. Sometimes Melissa felt homesick and would sneak away from home. One day, after a rainstorm, the young woman got stuck in the mud and tried in vain to get out. The girl cried, put her hands on her knees and froze. "Let me stay here in the woods. I'll only disturb everyone anyway," she whispered. Then she felt someone push her wheelchair and it rolled easily out of the mire. Melissa turned and saw that it was Rick. Suddenly she realized that she wasn't ashamed to accept his help. After all, there was no pity in this man's eyes that she had so often seen in other people. His gaze radiated warmth and calmness. Here he knew for sure that one must live, no matter what. "I'm sorry," Melissa said. "I'm just a little homesick." "I understand," the man nodded. At that moment, she realized that she was not indifferent to him. Some unknown pinching feeling enveloped every cell of her body, and Rick was getting more and more used to Melissa. She was afraid every day that he would leave, but he wasn't going to. "I've got money, a fridge full of groceries," he said. "Leo fixed the car. We can go to the city in peace. I'll stay with you for now." Martha was sneaking conversations with Rick too. She liked everything about him, but she saw the beginnings of true love in her sister's heart. "Melissa?" Martha asked. "No, I can see that she's attached, but I'm afraid there's no future for you two. I can see that you like each other, but she's a cripple." "And you don't give up," Rick said firmly. "You said the doctor gave her hope." "Well, she's just a little girl," Martha countered. "That's good. You know how miracles happen?" Rick remarked. "You probably know better than I do, having seen more than I have. But let's all do our best. Let's follow the recommendations to the end, and then we'll see." Rick's words encouraged Martha and gave her faith in her sister's recovery. She diligently began to do exercises with her every day and invited a witch doctor from the village, who was famous throughout the area. Abigail, the old witch doctor, tall and sturdy, came to Melissa's house every day and carefully kneaded her lower back and limbs. What she was doing was unclear. Her methodology remained a mystery. But after 3 months, Melissa's feet were moving, and after 5 months, leaning on Rick's arm, she was walking in the pine forest to her favorite places. They were timid steps, and it took them hours to get there, carrying the chair with them. When the young woman grew tired, she would transfer to the chair and Rick would roll her along the forest trails with the breeze. Still, she felt like a normal person now, and she even had plans for the future. "Rick, I'm so grateful to you and Kevin and Abigail," Melissa said. "I honestly didn't think I'd ever stand on my own 2 feet. Now that I'm stronger, I'd like to do something useful." "You can't even do chores yet," Rick said. "I've got an idea I'd like to share with you. I've got a lot of money saved up, and I don't want to spend it. I used to be a carpenter. My business was good. I had an excellent labor teacher at school. He taught me how to make doors, tables, and chairs. I'd like to suggest that you set up a workshop in one of the rooms. We only have 2, but there's 6 of them. Your father set it up. Is there room? And you'll be my assistant, taking orders, keeping accounts. How's that sound?" "Great," Melissa said. "I'm all for it. How do I repay you for your concern?" "Oh, come on," Rick stopped her. "I didn't start this to thank you. I'm happy with the decision myself. And don't you dare make any bows. But what I offered you, I can do. Let's do it together." And in a month, both of them were already working in the village workshop. The demand was great. It was far from the city. Deliveries were expensive. And here everything was close by. And Rick was an excellent craftsman. Good workmanship went fast. Sometimes, though, they worked late, but willingly. One day the young men made a day off, took fishing rods, and went to the river. The bite that day was excellent. Rick and Melissa competed, who has faster buckets filled with beautiful fish. And the girl won. She jumped up and down with joy and teased Rick a little. "You've got to be more agile. And you're standing there thinking about something you don't know what you're thinking about. Tell me, what are you thinking about? The man put the fishing rod on the ground, came closer to her, and gently put his arm around her waist. He looked Melissa in the eyes and said, "You and I have been together for 6 months now, living in the same house. And I realize that I really need you, but I think it's time to make this relationship official. How do you feel about that?" Melissa was a little confused. She wrapped her slender arms around his neck and nestled her lips against his. So they stood by the quiet river and kissed to the birdsong. They embraced in silence, which was broken only by the occasional splashes of frogs jumping into the water. "I wouldn't be away from you for a moment," the young woman smiled. "But what about my marriage?" She sighed. "How? What to do?" Rick was surprised. "Divorce. That's understandable. But I don't want to see that traitor, that cruel man." "Yes, now everything can be done in absentia, and you'll be divorced quickly. I'll give you the money." "Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be examined soon. Of course, they'll take away my disability and my benefits will stop. So I'll take it. I'll take yours, Rick." "So what? I don't care about the benefits. You and me, we're doing good. We got a house. It's so beautiful, it's breathtaking. Your sister's around, your nephews too. We'll get our own." Rick gave Melissa a playful look. "How would you like that?" "Yeah, I'd love to," Melissa smiled. "Then let's pack up and go." And holding hands, the happy young people headed home. Rick stirred in his sleep. He opened his eyes and looked at Melissa sleeping next to him. Carelessly throwing on a sheet, he stepped out into the yard and froze, listening to the crickets singing. After an outdoor shower with wet, fierce hair, he made his way to the kitchen to boil the kettle, holding the steaming knob in his hand. He walked to the window. Beyond it was a thick night and a clear sky studded with stars. In an instant, the room was filled with the smells of the passing summer. He took a sip of tea, set the cup on the windowsill, and returned to the bedroom. And the next day, a big surprise awaited them. In the afternoon, someone knocked loudly on the door. Rick was sound asleep. Melissa wrapped herself in a sheet and went to open the door. Jonathan stood on the doorstep. He stared at his wife in surprise. Before him was a beautiful Melissa, with a blush playing on her cheeks. Melissa stood on her feet. "How's that?" He'd already backed up. "Were you even in the chair?" Melissa took a bold step toward him. She held her head up proudly as she stepped through the door. "I have. I did." "And you're not happy about my health?" Rick came out of the door. Jonathan was surprised. "She's already got a boyfriend. That's not nice." "When he was alive, maybe." "Was it good for a wife to leave a sick man to his fate?" Rick asked angrily. "What business is it of yours?" "Who the hell are you?" "Me? I'm a normal guy," Rick said. He walked over to Melissa and put his arm around her shoulders. "You're a cowardly, sneaky bitch. Don't you dare insult me." Jonathan forbade it. "So who is insulting you?" Rick replied calmly. "I'm telling the truth. The fact of the matter is everything. You married her and took responsibility for her. And then you abandoned her like a useless thing and ran away. What? Are you here for the inheritance now? I thought she was dead asleep. Here, have a bite." Rick gave Jonathan the finger. "Live and breathe. Get out to here. Wait for the court notice. She'll file for divorce." Jonathan looked up at them, his eyes wide with fear, and no remorse. He turned and walked away. The young people watched him until the man's figure became a tiny dot on the horizon. "Let him go. It's a kilometer to the bus," Rick grinned, pulling Melissa close to him. He'd wasted a ride, and the earth bears them. They stood huddled close together. A tall, strong man held in his arms a fragile woman who was a head shorter than his chosen one, and seemed defenseless in his powerful arms. Their souls were filled with happiness. These two knew what life was all about. After pain, suffering, and despair, they finally tasted the sweet fruits of existence. And Jonathan returned to town penniless. But soon Emily got what she wanted. She was just delighted that she finally got rid of the unwanted daughter-in-law and was waiting for her son to find a normal girl. It is only necessary to restrain the son, so that he knew his chosen one did not offer his hand and heart yet, to look closely. Clearly, the man in the city needs a woman, but let them live in a civil marriage, just as the woman had planned. To her great joy, Jonathan soon had an affair with a female co-worker at work. He had long worked as a stagehand in the city theater. And then leading actress Samantha had her eye on him. That was something to be proud of. The theater actress was a media personality by provincial standards. Everyone in town knew her and said hello when they met her. Not like Melissa, a country girl, married and ugly, naive, stupid, and clueless about life. Samantha was the complete opposite of her grasping, stubborn, and cunning. She's the kind of woman who'll make Jonathan's life worth living. She knew life, and she wouldn't be lost. But Emily's joy was short-lived. The chosen one of her son turned out to be a cruel and very selfish person. At first, they both could not breathe on her, and as if they did not notice the arrogance and sharpness of the woman. She made it clear to Jonathan's mother that she did not need any advice, and that the man would obey only her. And a little later completely dumbfounded the elderly woman, announcing that she had to move out of the apartment and leave them to live together. After entering high society, Samantha mocked borscht and cutlets Jonathan's mother, considering them a relic of the past. She would not go near the stove at all, she was just squeamish about it. So she and Jonathan ate at cafes and restaurants, which cost a lot of money. When Emily hinted at this, Samantha gave her a scornful look and said, "Mother, don't meddle in our affairs. We can do without you. I, thank God, earned good money and can afford to eat properly. Do you want me, the prima donna of the theater, to walk around with such a manicure?" She stretched forward a well-groomed, graceful hand with a perfect manicure. Washing pots and pans or peeling potatoes. You don't get it, do you? Don't you realize who you're dealing with? Do you think I'm a dumb housewife or a great actress who gets applause all over town? So Mom, drop the insinuations and get on with your life. Can't you see you're dealing with adults? You want to run this place? It won't work with me. But Jonathan likes home-cooked food, Emily tried to object. He loved it before me. And now we're going to be watching calories and waist size. I signed Jonathan up for the gym. Let him watch his figure. The elderly woman clutched her head. You have to go to the gym after a hard day's work. She's totally draining my son. Samantha kept Jonathan under her thumb, and he could only go out with his mother under her supervision. She thought it was best to keep her common-law husband away from dangerous influences. Emily had to rent an apartment. She felt like an exile there. Her son did not come to her at all, not even for dinner, let alone for help, such as moving furniture or taking a broken washing machine to the repair shop. One day she tried to complain about this to Samantha. She replied, "I'll give you the number of a handyman who comes to your house to fix machines. And there's a cleaning and domestic help agency. Google it, Emily, it's all on the internet. It's not hard work, you'll find the contacts yourself." But how will I pay for these services? The pension is small, she asked. What's my concern? What's my concern? I have my own mother, a very independent lady. But you won't let my son help me, cried the lonely woman. Why not? It's just that he doesn't want to go himself. He's got a lot to do. And he has to go to the gym. What does he live for? If he doesn't pay attention to me, how many men will be around? I'm very attractive. Yes, you are, Emily thought. God sent that lady. She had to watch her favorite son care for the welfare of his beloved, to earn money for cafes and restaurants. After work, he worked part-time as a loader and janitor. Samantha did not lift a finger so as not to spoil the image of a social diva. She only bought expensive clothes and shine at receptions. To Jonathan, she slowly gave strict instructions on housekeeping. He cleaned, grocery shopped, cooked, and did her laundry if she was lazy. Samantha had her own life trajectory: spas, fitness centers, coffee with friends, play rehearsals, touring. It began to dawn on Emily that such a woman was unlikely to want to give birth, and she would be left without grandchildren. One day she asked Samantha a question on the subject. "Are you trying to make me a performer?" "Oh, really? Can't you see I don't want to spend money on other people? Who's going to stay up all night and take care of these kids? I have no time at all. but it's the continuation of the family, the thread. You have to love someone. You have to love yourself first of all. Samantha, the prima donna of the theater, replied instructively. After these words, Emily walked around offended and tried to tell Jonathan. Son, I wanted us to live together and run the household. I'd babysit my grandchildren. I'd even sell my car to do it. And now I've been kicked out of my apartment. That woman has a lot of power over you. Not only did she kick me out, but she's exploiting you. Don't be so dramatic, Jonathan waved her away irritably. Samantha is a smart woman, and she's doing the right thing. I thought I'd be there to help you. I'll cook somewhere, clean up, and when the grandchildren come, I'll babysit. What grandchildren? What are you talking about? Samantha has a career, Fame. We still want to live for ourselves, and a housekeeper would do a much better job. We're thinking about getting one now. You can get sick or get in the wrong places. From her, we can demand to do what is necessary, talk strictly, not ceremonious. And we can ask her out the door at any time if she gets fed up. That's what they asked me to do, Emily complained to her son, sobbing. Well, you have some savings. Buy yourself an apartment. After all, I'm an adult and should live separately. Or how do I do with you? If you yourself did not want to go anywhere, at least on weekends I can walk with you in the park. We're busy on weekends. I don't have time to go out. I don't have time on weekdays to be with my wife and go out with you. It's petty grudges and tears. Emily couldn't help herself. You'll feel what it's like to be ignored by your own people. Stop cursing at me. Jonathan was outraged. Go do your own thing and leave me alone. You should have had more children. You'd be traveling around with them, and you wouldn't have the time to worry about the attention. Life would have been peaceful. Is this the thanks you get, son, for all I've done for you? I didn't ask you to do anything for me. Maybe you still need to do the honors? Jonathan replied. Samantha wants to officially marry me. I'll marry her, and then I'll be good and happy. Oh, you will be, Emily lamented. And you've already gotten into it with Samantha. Well, I'm sorry, but I have to agree with you on this one. I never loved her. I just picked her up out of pity. But now I'm crazy about Samantha. We don't need your advice. I'd appreciate it if you'd stay out of my family. I'm not giving Samantha to anyone. Finally, a woman like that. Emily sighed heavily and left. She'd gotten used to being alone, but she couldn't fully accept it. 1,000 times she regretted that she had treated poorly the simple country girl who was willing to do anything to make her son happy. It came to her that a boomerang had come into her life. She had kicked out. She had been kicked out. She had offended. Now she was being offended. There was nothing she could do against Samantha. That woman would not let anything get in her way. The only hope was that Jonathan would someday get bored with Samantha and leave her. And that prospect didn't take long to materialize. As soon as Samantha was courted by the mayor's son and offered to marry her, she immediately threw Jonathan out of her heart and soul. Emily returned to the apartment to help and support the man. But he fell into a drunkenness and only waved his mother away. It's all your fault. All meddled, Samantha annoyed. That's why she left in the end. The son quit his job and plunged into a long drunkenness. A bad habit took over him. And he almost 6 months did not part with a drink, quit the theater, saying that he cannot every day to see the former. Jonathan didn't get a new job. It was hard to live on one pension, but to all the requests of his mother he remained deaf. When Emily got tired of her son's loneliness and inattention, she took the advice of a neighbor who spent all day on a dating site. She always told her that you should not wait for a miracle, and you need to create it yourself. So the woman decided to register on such a resource. Going through the photos of candidates, she stopped at one man. It was a handsome man who looked about 70 years old. Of course, under the photo was the age of 57. Likes to embellish, the woman thought. But that was okay. It wasn't that scary. The man attracted her by the fact that he did not put forward a long list of requirements. He simply wrote that he was looking for someone close in spirit, so that they would be good together. Emily was the first to take the initiative and texted him, "Let's date." The man was cautious and at first tactfully asked her about her interests and told her about his hobbies himself. She liked that their conversations were only about pleasant subjects. So Emily found information that an exhibition of rare fruit trees was touring the city, and invited the man there. He gladly agreed. The date was set at the front entrance of the local history museum, where the exotic exhibition was brought. The day before Emily seriously engaged in her appearance went to the hairdresser, did a manicure, and then went to a beautician. All these procedures helped her look 5 years younger. Dressed in a modern new blouse and a long leather skirt, she looked great. Even the drunken Jonathan, who had fallen out of the door of his room, sobered up for a moment and stared at his mother in bewilderment. "Where are you dressed up? You think you're going to sneak away from me?" "No. Mother ruined my private life, and I'll ruin it for you." Emily had no doubt about that. Her son considered her the culprit of all his troubles and tried to take revenge in every possible way. He spat, taking food from her hands, constantly demanded money, and insulted the woman every day. Stepping outside, Emily breathed a sigh of relief. At least this way she could forget about her complicated relationship with Jonathan. The neighbors sitting on the bench looked at her in surprise. "Where are you going so dressed up, Emily?" "Out for a walk." The woman waved them away. She was looking forward to seeing them again, and had been imagining what it would be like all along the way. So she was a little taken aback when she saw her chosen one in a pair of worn jeans, a stale shirt, and a wrinkled jacket. But immediately she restrained herself, justifying it by the fact that after all he was a single man. There were no women's hands in the house. That's why he was like that. But at the museum, Oliver surprised her too. In correspondence, he indicated that he was fond of gardening, and at the exhibition only did what he was looking at visitors, especially young women. She excused him, saying it was just curiosity and nothing more. When they left the building, he didn't invite her to a cafe or a park, but went straight to his house. Emily, who was hungry for male attention, immediately agreed. His apartment was small, but tastefully furnished. The furniture was inexpensive, but good. In courtship, the man was experienced. He immediately took out a bottle of champagne, fruit and candy from the refrigerator. He set it all down in front of Emily. She became intoxicated by his concern and accepted the advances. After a couple glasses of champagne, the woman decided not to let the initiative out of her hands and offered to dance. She passionately kissed the beau and waited for the same response. Instead, she received a certain coldness. The man somewhat distanced himself and explained it by the fact that, say, there was no need to hurry, we need to get to know each other well, and then allow themselves all sorts of liberties. After that, he called a cab and sent his lady home. The next day, Emily waited tensely for a call from her admirer, and Oliver did call her and offered to meet on her property. She quickly agreed and began to think of somewhere to take her son out for that time. Jonathan was just in a state where he could take care of himself. So she sent Jonathan to her Aunt Tyr's house in the countryside and gave him money for a drink. After seeing her son off on the train, she came home and cleaned the whole apartment. Then she took care of herself, took a bath. She seemed to use exquisite creams and perfumes. And of course, she got busy preparing the treats. When the guest arrived, the table was bursting with viands, chops with pineapple, hearty salads with mayonnaise, meat cuts. The woman spent her entire pension on this treat. The only money left in her purse was for bread. This time Oliver came to her very dressed up, in a perfect evening suit and a white shirt and tie. In his hands he held a large bouquet of scarlet roses. The whole evening the man did nothing but compliment her on what a wonderful hostess she was, a dazzling beauty and a wonderful conversationalist. After dinner, Emily tried to get close to the man again, turned on some lyrical music and sat next to him on the couch. Oliver's reaction to her proximity was very strange. He jumped up sharply and said that he had to go home. He said that his close relative was coming from a distant land and that he had to get ready. The woman was discouraged, but took the man's problem with understanding and let him go. He said goodbye and promised that he would call her tomorrow and make a date with her. Emily was insanely happy that their relationship was continuing. It meant that Oliver liked her. Late that night, Jonathan returned from his trip and told her how his meeting with Aunt Thera had gone. He could barely stay on his feet. Oliver didn't call the next day, though Emily kept her cell phone ringing. In the light of the past events, she thought that she was in heaven, and the meeting with a new acquaintance will never happen. But the woman reassured herself there is no telling what kind of health problems can be at such an age. And moreover, the relatives came to visit. It's just that the man has no time for me. What was her surprise when the next morning she woke up to the fact that someone unceremoniously pounded her door with his fist. She jumped up, threw on her robe, and ran to the peephole to see that it was Oliver. "Sorry to be here so early," he said. "I need to see you." Relieved that the man had missed her, Emily swung the door open and let him in. He walked across the carpet into the hall in his boots and sank tiredly onto the couch. The woman sat down beside him and placed her hand on his. "Well, tell me what happened to you," she asked. The man twitched his hand and stared at her in silence. Emily realized she was being impolite and offered him tea or coffee. Oliver nodded silently, and the woman went into the kitchen. When she came into the room with a cup of steaming, fragrant coffee, she found the man sleeping on her couch with his booted feet tucked under him. She couldn't understand what was going on, but she didn't bother to wake her guest. For once a man was in her apartment. She'd divorced Jonathan's father when he was a year old. He'd been going out, picking women younger than him, and this was such a nice man. Something extraordinary must have happened. Maybe a fight with the family, maybe something else. Pity overwhelmed Emily's heart. She covered her beau with a warm, clean blanket and left the room. He woke up immediately, didn't explain anything, but asked to stay in the apartment for a few days. Emily warned him that she had a son and that he drank. Oliver didn't let that stop him. He was determined to stay with Emily. Despite the negativity coming from Jonathan, the man showed the most positive side of himself. He was polite, tactfully adapted in everyday life, and also proved to be a good lover. At his age, and Emily was overjoyed. How lucky she was. A few days later, Oliver asked her to go to his apartment to get his things. It turned out that it was rented and had to be vacated. The woman was very happy that her beloved decided to finally move in with her. All day she fussed, cooked a delicious dinner, and held educational conversations with her son. But her happiness had the opposite effect on Jonathan. He was angry and cursed. "Jonathan, let me buy you an apartment," Emily said. "I may only have enough for a one-bedroom now, but it's yours." "Well, you can go back to your one-bedroom. Where am I going to stay?" "I have every right to stay," replied the son. Emily was struggling with the housing issue and decided to discuss it with her boyfriend. She called Oliver and explained that her home had long been a gift to her son, and he didn't want to leave it, and she didn't have enough money to buy a new one. He turned out to be a wise man and offered to wait, promising to be there in person soon. By evening, however, Oliver had not shown up, and calls to his number had no effect. Emily lay awake at the window all night. Jonathan noticed her agitation and said wryly, "You have done so much evil to people in life that you will not be happy, will not come here you sick. And you, Santa, are you clean?" The woman couldn't stand it, just white and fluffy. "We started the car together, so don't play the victim." "She's happy now." Jonathan laughed. "We are bred and we are from fate and retribution. Stop imagining what we have done. We both didn't like her. It's called mother use. We treated her like a thing and did nothing wrong." "No, let's face it," he announced, pouring himself a glass of vodka. "Only I can pour it all away, and you'll have to live with it for the rest of your life." "Get out of here," Emily ordered. "Leave me alone. It's hard enough as it is." The next morning, the woman was not herself from the excitement of the experience, did not find a place. It seemed to her that something irreparable had happened to Oliver. She decided to go to his old address and find out everything. Maybe the man needed help. The door of his apartment was opened by a young and very beautiful woman. She had a slender figure, large breasts and wide hips. With her legs spread wide, the bright brunette was smoking a cigarette. "Who are you here to see?" she asked Emily. "I'm here to see Oliver. I'm looking for him. He's missing. He used to live here, rented an apartment. Maybe you know something?" Suddenly, the woman burst out laughing. "Of course I know everything about him, because I'm his wife. Of course. I wonder who you are." Emily was stunned. She felt so dizzy that she leaned against the wall and moved back toward the elevator. "Hey, who are you? Why are you showing up in the morning, bothering people?" she heard herself say. The feeling of humiliation was so strong that the woman could not control herself and began to sob. The old ladies gathered in the courtyard looked at her in amazement. "What's wrong with you, woman? Why are you crying bitterly?" they asked in unison. Emily could not stand it and told them the whole story. "Did you get trapped where you wanted to go?" They told her that Oliver and his young wife ran a swindling business, finding old ladies and swindling them. They're known all over the neighborhood, so they prey on strangers. Back home, the woman called her son into the kitchen. "Where's your vodka? Give mother a shot," she asked. Jonathan went out and soon returned with a bottle. He filled the glasses. "To life," Emily said. "It's a bitter life." "There's no need to complain about life," Jonathan said conciliatingly. "We are what we are, and so is life. The law of the boomerang has never been repealed." Emily nodded. Empty, she got up from the table, walked to her bedroom, and collapsed tiredly on the bed. Melissa's image suddenly appeared in her dreams. "What did you want, Emily? What measure is right for you is right for you," she said. "You left a sick woman to fend for herself. You didn't want to take responsibility for her. And you turned your son against her. And now suddenly you want a woman's happiness. Where would it come from? All your life you've been sowing anger, envy, and discontent around you. That's why everything good is repelled from you. And life turned into a crumpled, dirty, useless leaf." Emily became so bad and ashamed that she did not want to wake up at all. After this incident, the woman became seriously ill and was hospitalized. No treatment regimen worked. Her blood pressure was at an all-time high. "Emily, you're lying here for nothing." A gypsy woman, a neighbor in the ward, suddenly spoke to her. "You have to get discharged immediately, or they'll heal you. Go home and review everything. And if you find anything foreign, burn it immediately. I can see that you're under a spell." Tired of treatment, and even more than from illnesses, the woman suddenly believed the stranger and left the hospital. When she returned home, she found a bundle of black inhuman hair under the sofa cushions. Fear gripped the woman. She realized that Oliver and his wife were also practicing magic and wanted to kill her. So when he slept on the couch, he'd put the magic thing there. Then when he found out it was Jonathan's apartment, he ran away. It was so scary that even after they realized that they couldn't take anything from Emily, the couple never removed the spoil. The woman squeamishly took the find, threw it in the sink, and wanted to set it on fire. Her hands were shaking with anger and indignation. The matches broke and wouldn't light. At last the flame burst out, and then the woman could not stand it and wept bitterly. And Melissa in the village was really enjoying her well-deserved happiness. She had gotten a divorce, and the young people were preparing to get married. What was their surprise when the former mother-in-law showed up on their doorstep in the early August morning? Melissa didn't even recognize her at first. "Hello, Melissa," Emily said in a squeaky voice. "Don't look at me like that. I know I'm sorry for what I did to you. Just don't send me away, Jonathan. When you came to our house and waited for the bus, we told him Abigail the witch doctor was involved in your healing. You know, I know it too." Melissa didn't hold back. "I realize you've never forgiven me, but I need you to take me to her. I've been cursed by dark people. I'm terribly ill. Have pity on me and help me to sin." "Okay, I will," Jonathan agreed. The young woman looked questioningly at Rick, who was standing next to her. He nodded silently. Melissa and Emily walked through the village to the witch doctor's house. They had nothing to talk about. Abigail, wearing a colorful white shawl, sat on a bench in front of her house. She began to speak without greeting. "You, woman, can be helped. Only you have a great sin on your hands, and the spoil holds on to it." "I know all my sins." Emily stopped and fell to her knees in front of Melissa. "I'm sorry I've done you a lot of harm. I confess I hated you fiercely. God humbled my pride. I sincerely apologize." "God will forgive. Stand up." Melissa gave her a hand. She stood up, shook herself, and looked at Abigail pleadingly. "Go," she commanded. "You won't get sick again, but you won't live happily ever after. Go to church, pray, repent. Don't come here again. It's a clean place and good people live here, even though it's in the middle of nowhere. We don't need your city vicissitudes for nothing. We have a forest near the river. The The sky is big, blue, clear, and our life is clear. So go back with yours and try to live by God's laws. Then you won't shout, "Why do I have these troubles?" Thank you. Thanked Emily and headed for the bus stop. She wasn't sick anymore, and she wasn't seeing Melissa anymore. Rick loved the falling leaves and big winter snows in the quiet village, the wonderful forest on the outskirts of the village, and the calm river waters. Less and less often he had dreams from his past life. His soul was now a little calmer under the influence of local morality. The first ice crunched under his feet. Melissa was walking towards him in a delicate cream-colored dress with a bouquet of white roses in her hands. A fairy girl, Jonathan thought lovingly. The dark side of life gave way to the divine light he saw in the eyes of the woman he loved. The earthly path had thrown him different roles, but the best fate had prepared him to be a loving husband and future father. Happy Mom was by his side today. She cried when he introduced her to Melissa. The wise woman immediately discerned in the bride impeccable purity, devotion, ability to sacrifice. A simple country girl with no education, but courageous and unbroken. She looked at her son in such a way that it made my throat constrict. There was so much enthusiasm and love in her eyes. Today is the wedding day, and the loved ones are around. On their faces, sincere joy. Here it is a warm family atmosphere, mutual understanding and respect, advice and love. Jennifer and David had known each other since high school. They'd sat at the same desk for 5 years, sharing cribs and canteen buns. After school, they walked home together to the first intersection. Their families were friends, their parents worked together, and often went to visit each other, taking their children with them. David had been making fun of Jennifer's haircut for 2 years, calling her a kid. Jennifer couldn't stand his jokes, the dirt under his fingernails, and the stupid look on his face. Despite their frequent quarrels, her parents had said since childhood that they looked good together. They predicted a wedding. And so it was. It all started with a waltz. At graduation in the school hall, their class was divided into pairs in early May and obliged to go to rehearsals after school. David refused to dance with his partner because he was afraid of dropping her or stepping on her foot. Jennifer was also very shy about dancing. David suggested that the line partner switch. For 2 weeks they twirled properly as a couple. On the 3rd week they began to feel strangely embarrassed, looking into each other's eyes and holding hands. On the 4th, David couldn't take it anymore. On the way home, he tugged Jennifer by the edge of her apron and blurted out, "Jennifer, I love you." "I think, do you?" "And I think I do," she mumbled, feeling her cheeks flaming. After graduation, they enrolled in the same university. For a whole month, they enjoyed their freedom and each other. They walked until dawn, took the electric train to the bay to swim and roast bread by the fire. Their parents did not interfere with their meetings and the development of romantic relationships. Jennifer received a proposal of marriage from David a year later and agreed without hesitation, with the only condition: first you need to get an education. Both found paid internships in large construction firms. On vacation after the session, often went on independent travel in Europe, America, and Asia. They graduated from university together, she with a blue diploma and David with a red one. After university, they worked as engineers by specialty. The wedding was played modestly, as the newlyweds wished after the signing of the champagne and launching doves from the threshold of the registry office. Most of the guests were led home after the banquet. Only the closest relatives and a couple of best friends came to David's parents' house. Jennifer often looked at the photograph taken on her and David's wedding day. It hung on the wall in their living room. The two of them, young and happy. David in a simple shirt, she in a light summer dress with open shoulders. Nearby hung pictures of their children. Jennifer had never dreamed of children. Her dreams for the future were limited to a successful career and a job with a vocation. From a young age, she had been striving to figure out what that calling was. After graduation, she changed several jobs and specialties. Nothing could interest her for a long time. But Jennifer wasn't about to give up. On her 30th birthday, she planned to change her life once again abruptly to quit the company where she worked for 2 years. Fate decided otherwise and gave Jennifer a sudden pregnancy. A double. David didn't interfere with her decision to keep the children. He knew that his wife would not listen to him and would do everything in her own way. Jennifer, After consulting with her mother and David's parents, decided to give birth. "I'm going to try a new role," she announced at a family meeting. "What if I like it? Maybe I'm meant to be a mother." The pregnancy was easy. Jennifer spent the entire 9 months meeting with friends, attending trade shows and a school for new parents. Together with David, the two of them set up a children's corner in the living room, bought a crib and a small dresser, baby clothes, diapers and toys. After the birth, the family got back together at David and their parents' house. David's father sat in a rocking chair, holding his granddaughter in each hand, Claire in his left, the jar in his right. And Madison's newfound grandmothers were setting the table. Jennifer's father, along with David, arranged chairs around the table. Jennifer herself was half reclining on the couch, trying to get into a position where her postpartum stitch wouldn't hurt. She looked at the peaceful bustle around her and was convinced of the rightness of her decision to become a mom. She loved this new chapter of their life and life together. The first year of motherhood flew by. Before Jennifer knew it, when she took the traditional photos of the twins on their birthday, she was wondering how these well-fed children had fit on her lap a year ago. Being in the constant care of children, and order in the house, changing diapers, cooking, cleaning, laundry, playing with the girls, evening baths, walks. The routine seemed to eat up all the time and attention. But Jennifer didn't complain. She liked to take her time doing housework, taking care of the children and putting the house in order. David took full charge of the family, and after work he would go to the market and the supermarket to buy groceries and everything he needed. Jennifer did not go shopping because of the queues and the incredible heaviness of the twins and the stroller. The second year went just as smoothly. Parents began to visit often, which allowed the young couple to get away to a restaurant or meet with friends. Jennifer and David were grateful for their parents' support and privacy. When Claire and Madison turned 3, the question of daycare came up. Jennifer was adamantly opposed to putting her children in the care of strangers. She and David sat in the kitchen after putting the girls to bed and argued heatedly. What do they feed them? How are they looked after? The other day your mom told me how a kid got hit by a car outside the kindergarten. He'd gone out of the yard and into the road while walking. There's no safety, Jennifer said. David shook his head silently. Won't you go crazy sitting at home? Are you having some kind of problem at work? He asked. Why would you think that? Are you so desperate for me to go to work? Admit it. Are we beggars? David laughed. No, of course that's not the point. What is it about? Jennifer asked. Are you jealous of my carefree life as a housewife? And you want equality justice? No, I'm just worried about you, David replied. Jennifer advanced on the stool toward her husband. And what is the reason for your worries? Aren't you bored? 3 years at home. It used to be that neither salary nor career success could keep you in one place for long. What about a vocation? Jennifer asked. I think I found it. Yeah, she raised her voice indignantly. Don't make that face. It's the truth. I really like being a mom. I don't like being a housewife as much. If we're not poor, maybe we can hire some Elizabeth to come once a week to do the general cleaning. David set the empty coffee cup carefully on the table. Well, if you like it, fine. Go ahead. Only I have to tell you something ... that he divorced me. Jennifer laughed. I won't be home from work later. It's now somewhere around 2. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. You got a mistress? More like a part-time job to pay Elizabeth. What kind of part-time job? I can't say. It wasn't exactly legal. Nothing criminal, David replied. Don't sigh. That's scary. Secret semi-legal business, Jennifer said. She stroked his head, reached up and kissed his temple. There's no way around it? No. You trust me? Where would I go? David asked. Is that why you wanted to put the girls in daycare? Were you afraid I'd get violent because you'd help me less? Or were you afraid I'd be jealous? All of them. But you're okay with it. I'll start tomorrow. Don't wait up for me. Go to bed, David said. I hope you're not going to do your business on the weekend? No, he looked at his hand, at his watch. Let's go to bed. We have to get up soon. From then on, David started coming home from work later. He made regular stops at the stores, quietly brought the bags into the kitchen, showered and got under the covers, trying not to wake the kids and Jennifer. No matter how hard Jennifer tried to find out the details of his part-time job, David wouldn't reveal them. All he said was that he was basically doing odd jobs and finishing one man's work for another. David has more experience in this sort of thing than this man. And of course he's not cheating on Jennifer. David promises to tell Jennifer everything when the hack job is over, in about a year. He didn't tell his parents anything either, not even his father, with whom he shared absolutely all his problems and successes. He reacted to his son's silence calmly. I guess that's the way it has to be, he told David and Jennifer. I trust him. And do you trust him? He'll tell me when he sees fit. Jennifer's parents weren't happy with that arrangement, especially Mom. Customer, she whispered, aggressively shutting the door to the room. Are you out of your mind? David told you in no uncertain terms that he didn't like you anymore? That you're offended? That he's got a mistress? Or that he's going clubbing? Do I look that bad, Mom? Jennifer smiled. It's not about looks. Your looks are great. Your figure, your hair, your face. But that's not why men love women. Why? For a sassy look and a crooked walk, Mom said. Why are you laughing? You know I'm right. Where is it? Where, I ask you? You're a good mom, but there's not much woman left in you. Your David sees you as a mom. Lenka, caring, kind, but he didn't marry his mother, he married a young, attractive girl. Mom, I've known David since 6th grade. He's seen things you haven't seen. Remember when I fell in the manure in the country? He pulled me out of it and cleaned me up and helped me wash my clothes. Not you. So what? So what? He loved me, he married me. That's why he loved me. That's why I married him, Jennifer said. Her mother waved her hand. Do as you please. If he cheats on you, don't come complaining to me. Life went on as usual. Jennifer got used to the new routine and missed her husband. She tried to get up early on weekdays to spend time with her husband at breakfast. She seriously considered going to work. She reasoned, yes, with a job, less time will be spent with the girls, but my husband will have less work, and they will be able to spend time together more often. The 4 of them. Jennifer did not share her thoughts with David. He was still as caring, calm and cheerful as before. His part-time job didn't bore him, but it didn't bring him much joy either. On Fridays, Elizabeth, the aunt Jennifer had dreamed of hiring, came to visit. Jennifer had found her through a cleaning agency. Elizabeth would scrub the tiles in the bathroom, kitchen, scrub the floors and windows, vacuum, clean stains from clothes, walls and furniture. After her cleaning, the apartment stayed clean until almost the next time she came back. In the meantime, Jennifer was out with Claire and Patricia. They went to the lake to feed the ducks, rode on the swings in the yard, and petted the neighbors' dogs. One day during their walk, Jennifer was approached by a neighbor, Madison. How are you two doing? She asked. Growing up. Madison gave Jennifer a little hug and a pat on the back. How are you doing? You're not sick, are you? No, thanks. Healthy as an ox, Jennifer said. Madison wanted to say something else, but she didn't. She stood there for a moment, her fist to her mouth. Listen, Christopher, she began. How are things with you and David? In what way? Not fighting. No, why do you ask? No reason, Madison said. Let's go to the bench and sit down. My legs are killing me. I went for a walk at 1 in the morning last night. My blood pressure spiked, and I needed some air. Be careful. Yeah, I'm careful. Yeah, I'm careful, Jennifer said. They cleared the bench seats of fallen leaves and sat down where they could see Patricia and Claire playing in the sandbox with the other children. So Madison continued. I went out for some air, and I saw David coming, and I recognized his car. I thought it was late. He's on his way home. Yeah, he's working late now. He's got some kind of part-time job, Jennifer said. A part-time job? Well, I guess so, Madison nodded. And I think he said hello to the neighbor, and he stopped and got out of the car, and I was standing there, under the lilac tree over there. The light of the street lamp wasn't falling. You couldn't see me. Before I could say hello, David's cell phone rang. I wouldn't want to distract the man. He answered it. I figured someone had asked him to buy groceries. He repeated the list. Milk, eggs. I don't remember everything. I didn't ask, Jennifer said thoughtfully. Maybe his parents called. Do they often take him shopping at 1 in the morning? Madison wondered. Jennifer listened to Madison carefully. Yeah, that's weird, she said. That's what I thought. That's why I thought I'd tell you. I'm not a gossip, I don't want to say anything. It just surprised me. A man comes home from work and someone calls him and asks him to buy milk. Where would he buy it? I don't know, Jennifer said. I'll talk to him today and find out, and I'll tell you. Don't. Madison became agitated. Why do I need your life? It's none of my business. But you get the point. After midnight, as usual, Jennifer waited for her husband in the kitchen. David came in quietly, closed the door, changed his clothes, and came up to her to kiss her. Hello, he said. What are you doing up again? I told you not to wait for me. I can pour my own tea. Jennifer whispered in his ear, hugging him. Curiosity is keeping me awake. Madison told me how you were on the phone last night asking for groceries. I asked my parents, and neither of them called you last night. David unclenched Jenny Farina's hands behind his back and pulled away. And what do you want to know? Who called me? Yeah, you promised you wouldn't be jealous of me. So why am I jealous? I'm not jealous, Jennifer said, slumping down on the stool. I want to know who you buy groceries for at night. No one. I came home last night after that conversation, and I bought groceries in the evening, as usual. Who's the groceries for? Jennifer asked. David leaned on the windowsill, sighed heavily, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Jennifer, I'm really tired. Let's not get jealous right now. I can't tell you who I bought groceries for. Is that your part-time job, buying groceries? Jennifer asked, jumping up from her seat and pacing the kitchen from corner to corner, arms crossed. I thought you were in the office doing reports and estimates, but you're buying milk for someone. David watched her movements in silence for a while. Then he came over and took her by the shoulders. For a woman, he said. I don't have another. If that interests you, believe it or not. In the morning, Jennifer caught Madison in the driveway and told her that her husband was buying groceries for his parents. The neighbor exhaled in relief and sincerity. Jennifer didn't talk about her personal life anymore and decided not to tell her mother about her husband buying groceries for someone else. She knew nothing good would come of it. If her mother knew, she would worry, speculate, and question her son-in-law's fidelity. Jennifer decided to devote all her time to New Year's Eve preparations. In the first year of Patricia and Claire's life, they did not have a proper celebration. Because the twins were sick, they didn't go to Jennifer's parents' house. They stayed in their apartment to watch dull TV, give the children medication on schedule, take their temperature, and eat Olivier salad bought at the nearest store. We didn't even have a Christmas tree, because we planned to decorate it in the country. So we bought a huge fluffy beauty at the sawmill, one for everyone, David and Jennifer and their parents. On January 1st, David's parents arrived. They brought some food from the New Year's table. They talked and babysat their granddaughters. On January 2nd, Jennifer's parents arrived and did the same thing. They showed pictures from the cottage, the Christmas tree, the huge garland in the yard, meat on the fire, homemade Napoleon. And on the third day, the girls recovered, which was confirmed by David's friend, part-time pediatrician. This year, Jennifer planned a double celebration. She bought her parents a Christmas tree with a wreath of pine needles and garlands. Patricia and Claire looked with interest at the decorations in paper bags waiting in the hallway. They didn't know yet that they would be spending a few days with their grandparents while their parents' sunbathed on the beach. Tickets to Egypt was the gift Jennifer had prepared for David. She got the tickets by chance and by sheer luck. She saw on one of the social networks the drawing of tickets when she was looking at photos of acquaintances with David. She decided to participate and won. It was her first experience of participating in such events and the first victory. Jennifer hadn't said anything to David yet. She wanted to surprise him. She packed the tickets in a beautiful envelope, waiting for the chimes to strike. They were to fly out on January 2nd and stay in Egypt for 3 days, returning before the end of the New Year holidays. Jennifer had warned her and her husband's parents. They happily agreed to look after the children, and with enviable responsibility kept silent, so as not to spoil the surprise. They decided to celebrate New Year's Eve at the cottage. The dacha belonged to Jennifer's parents. They had built it in the Soviet years on a plot of land that they had managed to snatch at a cheap price during the auction. They installed gas and electricity themselves, dug a well. Then came a good house with a log attic, a bathhouse and fruit trees. Jennifer's mother planted new flowers every year, beautifying the plot. She grew vegetables, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers in the greenhouse, onions, carrots, and herbs in the beds. Jennifer loved the cottage, and so did David. They both had many memories of childhood, youth, and their honeymoon, most of which they had spent here. The wood paneling of the attic was scrawled with a penknife, David, Jennifer, David, Jennifer, David is a fool, Jennifer is a chicken. Before becoming a couple, David and Jennifer had lived here as friends all summer during school vacations, running to swim at the lake and climbing the apple trees in the orchard. Now the cottage attracted them with its privacy, the familiar smells of the cozy living room, and the woods nearby. It was hard to imagine a better place to celebrate New Year's Eve. David worked until December 30th, so on December 30th they poured hot tea into a thermos, took sandwiches with them, put Patricia and Claire in the back seat, and prepared for a 3-hour journey through traffic and uncleared roads to the accompaniment of children's crying. As soon as they arrived, the children were picked up by their parents and sent David and Jennifer off to bathe in the bathhouse, have lunch and rest after the road. The elders arrived a week early to avoid traffic and clean the house before the guests arrived. On December 31st, the women made salads and the men roasted meat outside. The twins were entrusted to Jennifer. They put them in an old sled, put a blanket underneath, and sent them out for a walk in the winter woods. Jennifer, dressed in her husband's jacket, her father's boots, and her mother-in-law's scarf, pulled the sled by the rope, her head cocked back and gazing at the snow-covered tops of the centuries-old spruce trees. The forest hummed as the wind picked up, piles of snow falling from the branches. Somewhere in the distance, a woodpecker tapped on a trunk. Patricia and Claire slept with their noses red from the frost. Suddenly, the silence of the forest was interrupted by a ringing sound. It was David's cell phone in Jennifer's jacket pocket. She cursed, glancing at the sleepwalking babies. Quickly, she fumbled for the phone and took the call. A certain rental was calling. "Yes," Jennifer said. "Hello? Can you hear me?" There was silence on the other end. "You probably can't hear me," Jennifer concluded. "We're in the woods, and the connection's bad. I'll tell David you called. He'll call you." After listening to the silence for a while, she ended the call. Before putting the phone back in her pocket, she looked at the time. They had been walking for an hour. They needed to get back. When she entered the wicket, carefully holding the sled, David and her father were grilling the last pieces of meat. "Jennifer, did they call you back?" David asked. "Some kind of rental," Jennifer replied. She went into the house, changed her clothes, and put the kids to bed. Now they wouldn't wake up until morning. Elizabeth stayed in the room with Patricia and Claire, sent Jennifer off to get dressed and put on her makeup. Jennifer had brought a long-sleeve silk dress and red lipstick. Her short hair didn't require styling, and she wasn't a big fan of makeup, believing she looked good without it. Her opinion was justified. In her 33 years, she looked the same as she did 10 years ago. Not a single wrinkle appeared on Jennifer's face. During this time, there had been a change with her husband, David. Over the past 10 years, he has turned from a shy and modest guy into a confident man who goes to the gym and watches his diet, wears a status watch, dresses solidly, and looks representative. Next to Jennifer, her husband looked older, and she liked it very much. She liked to feel protected, to feel her husband's trust and her power. She put on her dress and warm socks, twirled around in the mirror, and went downstairs. At the Christmas tree, she saw David, looking like a magazine cover model, in slacks and a dark green sweater with braids. Elizabeth was also stacking presents under the tree. "I'm ready," Jennifer said as she approached her husband. "Jennifer, beautiful," Elizabeth exclaimed theatrically, clutching her heart. "You're so beautiful." "Beautiful," David smiled, putting his arm around her waist. and we want to put all the presents under the tree and sign them, just like in the good old days. We'll open them after the chimes strike." Jennifer leaned over and put the signed envelope under the tree. Jennifer's mom's voice came from the kitchen. She was calling for her daughter to help her. Jennifer put on an apron, moved a few dishes to the living room table, arranged the slices nicely on plates, and laid out the utensils. It was 3 hours until New Year's Eve. Everyone sat down at the table. The meat, prepared in advance, was heated in the oven. It filled the room with the tart smell of smoke. However, the smell of spruce branches interrupted it. They began to remember the past year, the girls' funny words, the mishap with the purchase of the car, the cat's disappearance and its return, the unsuccessful experiments with Jennifer's father's appearance. Appetizers were rapidly disappearing from the table. Faces grew ruddy, eyes buttery. From the wine Jennifer's mom was drinking, she would leave the kitchen every now and then, only to return with another batch of mashed potatoes or meat. Everyone got up with glasses of champagne and shouts of yay and cheerful clinking of glasses to welcome the new year. Elizabeth went up to the second floor and checked on the girls. They were still asleep, having thrown off the blanket, and were cuddled across the double bed. When Jennifer returned to the family, everyone had moved to the couch, covered in plaid. Elizabeth alone went from the Christmas tree to the couch, giving the recipients gifts: David from Mom, Dad from David, Jennifer from Jennifer. She voiced the signed labels. David from Jennifer. "Hang in there, David." He picked up the envelope, showed it to Jennifer, making sure it wasn't divorce papers. "I hope so," Jennifer laughed. "Worse." David opened the envelope, pulling out the vouchers. Surprise. Jennifer kissed him on the cheek. "You and I are going to Egypt for 3 days. Mom and Dad will watch the girls. I've arranged it. Can't you say no? You don't have to go to work." Jennifer won them a month ago. Elizabeth entered. Was it hard not to blab? Say it was hard, the others agreed. David remained silent and twirled the tickets in his hands, frowning. The smile was gone from his face. "You don't like it?" Jennifer asked. "Come on, let's go talk." They went out onto the porch, putting on their parents' felt boots and throwing on their jackets. The tickets were left lying lonely on the couch. David and Jennifer's parents looked at them anxiously, trying to diffuse the situation and make conversation. "Jennifer, I can't fly, I have work," David said, his gaze hard. "That's very nice of you. I appreciate your efforts. I suggest you go on your own, get away, get some rest." "What kind of work? You said you weren't going to the office until the 8th. "I'm not going to the office. I need a part-time job." Jennifer bit her lip, trying to hold back her tears. But it wasn't working. She sobbed. "What kind of part-time job is it that you can't give up for 3 days? Couldn't you and I go on vacation together?" Cheryl interrupted. "The last time we went was 4 years ago, before I got pregnant. Don't you want to spend time together without kids and parents like we used to?" David wiped her tears with the back of his palm, put on his hoodie, and buttoned up his down jacket. "I want to know what kind of part-time work you're doing now," she demanded. Her husband smiled guiltily and shrugged, signaling that he wasn't about to reveal his secrets. Jennifer turned and walked into the house, slamming the door. Her parents sitting in the room flinched in surprise, but she didn't listen to their questions or sympathy. Jennifer took off her felt boots and down jacket and went up to the second floor to the room where her daughters slept. Locking herself in, she threw the tickets on the floor beside the bed. Resting her forehead on her knee, she cried silently, clutching the hair on her temples until it hurt. And when she ran out of tears, she curled up on the floor and fell asleep. In the morning, she was awakened by a barely audible knock on the door. It was David. He had brought breakfast and a warm robe. She didn't speak to him. She woke the girls, combed their hair, dressed them, washed them, and braided their pigtails. "I didn't do ponytails," said one of the daughters. David took the children in his arms and carried them to breakfast. The parents were still asleep. Jennifer made the girls porridge, left them to David, and got dressed and went out for a walk. Dawn was breaking in the east. The snow crunched loudly beneath her feet, and frost clung to her eyelashes. This wasn't the kind of holiday Jennifer had envisioned when she'd bought garlands and gift paper. "At least my face isn't swollen from the cold." she reassured herself, waving her arms and quickening her steps in an attempt to warm up. Hot broth and sleepy parents were waiting for her at home. The drinks from last night had taken their toll on their vigor and well-being. Lunch passed in silence. After lunch, Jennifer's mother stayed with her in the kitchen washing dishes while the others went sledding. After making sure everyone was gone and the front door was closed, she pounced on her daughter with questions. "So what happened yesterday? David didn't like your present?" Jennifer nodded grimly. "Why?" Jennifer's mother asked. "I don't know. I mean, how did he not explain it to you?" "He did. He has a part-time job on the holidays," Jennifer said. "Can't you say no?" "Can't." What kind of part-time job is that?" Jennifer's mother threw a plate in the sink. "Ask him. Maybe he'll tell you," she said disapprovingly. "I knew it. I told you, Jennifer, he'd find a mistress. And here it is." Jennifer didn't listen any further. Her mother tore off her apron and ran into the room. Jennifer heard the children and her father-in-law return from their walk, her husband's cheerful voice telling her something. But she couldn't find the strength to open the door and go down to her family. It seemed as if her life was crumbling before her eyes, and she was powerless to do anything about it. After an hour, she got up, packed her and the girls' things into a suitcase, and called a cab. She hastily said goodbye to her parents, dressed the crying children who didn't want to go anywhere. And before slamming the door behind her, she turned to her husband. "If you want to tell me about your part-time job, please come home. Until then, don't show up," Jennifer snarled, nodded to her parents, and closed the door. For 2 days, the three of them lived with Claire and Patricia. Her mother called. David's father called. David himself called. Reassured Jennifer that it was foolish to overreact, to take offense at nothing. Guaranteed her husband's repentance in their summer vacation together. Hinted that spouses are supposed to have some secrets from each other. That the desire to thoroughly know everything about her husband's life is more like a pathology in infantile Jennifer, rather than a fair demand. After those long phone conversations, she was nervous and anxious for a long time, despite her outward calmness, preparing breakfast or lunch for her daughters, participating in their games. But she herself was far away, and everything inside Jennifer cried. She hated her husband for betraying her and was angry at her relatives because they supported him and not her. She hated herself, accepting for a while the presence of her infantilization. Couldn't find someone to blame, and went in circles in her reasoning. The longer Jennifer thought about what had happened, the less she realized anything. Eventually, Jennifer grew tired of the uncertainty. She called her husband, and without answering his greetings, blurted out, "If I find out you have someone on the side, you won't see the girls again. Agreed?" Silence. The second thing, Jennifer continued, "I'm going out to work. I want to make some money so I feel safe. And 3, since you're not saying anything." "I'm going home," her husband David interrupted. "I'm bringing your presents. My parents gave them to me. I'll be there in 2 hours." He came home as Jennifer was putting Patricia and Claire down for their afternoon nap. He opened the door with his own key, set the bag of his wife's gifts on the kitchen table, put the goodies in the refrigerator. Through the open bedroom door, he stood looking at Jennifer and the children for a while. She was reading a book to them, stroking Claire's head, and Patricia was already snoozing next to her. When Claire fell asleep, Jennifer closed the book, climbed out of bed and left the room, closing the door. David was sitting on the couch in the living room. "Come here," he said, patting the couch next to him. "Let's have a talk. Or are you still holding a grudge?" "I resent it," Jennifer replied and sat down on the couch. Her husband's hand rested on her shoulder. She saw the ring on his ring finger and felt tears come to her throat. David pulled her to him, buried his face in her hair. "Jennifer." "I'm sorry," he said. "That's what you wanted to hear. I'm an idiot. An asshole. The world's worst husband and father, a freak and a bastard, a scoundrel. But I'm not cheating on you. I'm sorry about that too. When are you going to tell me about your part-time job?" "Soon." "Soon. I already told my parents." "Yeah?" Jennifer rounded her eyes and jumped off the couch. Humor told me no. Yeah, your mom said not to tell you. You wouldn't understand. Why wouldn't I understand? I wondered. Jennifer stared expectantly. David didn't say anything. If I asked you to give up this part-time job, who would you choose? Her or me and the girls? Then pick us. Jennifer, I'm choosing you now. Jennifer sat on the edge of the couch. No more coming home late, always on time, yes? Yes, David nodded. I'll just post something tomorrow. And no more part-time jobs, David continued. But you still won't tell me where you're going tomorrow and why. I will, he nodded. June. Jennifer thought for a moment, then nodded and smiled victoriously. She had dinner to make and laundry to do. David ironed shirts and a suit. After dinner and an evening walk, they went to bed in the same bed as before, as if nothing had happened. For the first time in a long time, Jennifer felt at peace. Her mind was quiet and empty. In the morning, after seeing her husband off, she was standing at the stove when the phone rang. Looking at the screen, Jennifer was surprised and delighted at the same time. The caller was an old friend with whom she had once been in the same class. Hello, Tara, she answered. It's been so long since we've talked to you. Hello, Jennifer. Tara's voice hadn't changed a bit from the last time they'd seen each other the year before. I missed you, so I thought I'd give you a call. Yeah, I missed you too, but I've been busy with one thing or another. I've been texting you on social media. Did you see it? Jennifer put the lid on the soup and relaxed on the couch. The conversation was long and happy. We discussed plans for the New Year's holidays, the health and success of the children, their ailments. They agreed to meet over the weekend to introduce the children and have some fun. Tara was almost a year younger than Jennifer. Too petite for her age, she was constantly attacked by her classmates. Things were taken away from her, food was taken from her in the cafeteria, and she was tripped up. Jennifer always defended her friend and fiercely fought back against her abusers. When David came to their class, the three of them became friends. Tara sat in the front alone, turning to David and Jennifer at recess to chat. She'd walk out of school with them, walk them to the gate, then walk in the opposite direction, confident that no snowball would fly at her head while her friends were walking behind her. David and Jennifer's affair, Tara took it calmly, even rejoiced. By this time, she also had a beau, Alex, from 9th grade. The guy was a year younger than Tara, but no one noticed the difference. Next to Tara, even some 5th graders looked more mature and manly. After graduation, Tara and Jennifer's paths diverged somewhat. They began to see each other less often, but often corresponded on social networks. Tara didn't go to university, choosing to work instead of studying. She went into business, making custom gingerbread and cakes because she had always loved to bake. Jennifer was happy about her friend's success and did not judge her choice. At Tara's wedding to Alex 3 years after graduation, Jennifer was a witness on the groom's side. She liked Alex, tall, confident, and determined. He was the oldest child in the family and had been used to being an adult since he was a kid. Already after school, he had started reselling and buying cars, and then turned it into a business. It seemed to Jennifer that Alex had all the qualities that David lacked. Looking at her husband's perfect handwriting as he finalized his next project, she sincerely wished he were less obedient and less correct. David didn't share Jennifer's enthusiasm for Alex. He considered him a hustler and discouraged Tharoux from marrying him. However, David's predictions about the imminent divorce did not come true. Chetta lived soul to soul for more than 10 years. They recently celebrated the 8th birthday of their son, Ethan. Jennifer and David were his godparents. Ethan was in 2nd grade and was eager to show off his yearly grades to his kind Aunt Jennifer, as he called her, hoping to receive praise and a gift for his progress. Before Claire and Leo were born, Jennifer had spent a lot of time with her friend and her young son, often dropping by after work with something delicious. Playing with Ethan, giving Tara time to rest and finish things. When Jennifer became a mom herself, she had no time for her friend and her son. All of it was taken up with taking care of her own daughters. During her pregnancy, she and Tara often met for a cup of tea. Tara shared with her her experience of motherhood, gave her advice and answered her questions. They saw each other at Jennifer's discharge from the hospital, and then their communication gradually decreased. Jennifer did not see it as anything terrible or unexpected, considered it a natural process. At Tara, Alex and Ethan's birthday party. She always called her friend to congratulate her, or one of the family members. Tara did the same. Every year, Jennifer was pleased to note that their friendship was as sincere and honest as it had been in high school. One thing that frustrated her was David's attitude toward her friend's husband at all their meetings and get-togethers. This attitude depressed the atmosphere, creating an invisible but palpable tension between the men. No one seemed to notice him except Jennifer. She tried to ask David the reason for his dislike. "Why do you treat Alex like he's stealing your car and reselling it?" Jennifer asked, sitting in front of the dressing table after a shower. David was reading something while lying in bed. He didn't answer right away. "Do you believe you can make an honest living buying cars at 18? "I believe that with a bit of entrepreneurial spirit you can. We have different ideas about enterprising people, that's all." Jennifer sighed, climbed under the covers, looked at her husband, who was still reading. "Do you think I'm enterprising?" "You gave birth to twins?" He laughed. "You bet I did. And no kidding, I've always liked your determination. You changed jobs so easily. I couldn't have done it." "Would you like to?" David thought about it. "No, I guess I'm not as good as you. You're not. It pays well. And you're happy?" "I bet you are." Jennifer often returned to the thought of why she often felt sorry for her husband and thought of him as an unhappy man mired in envy. It was envy that she attributed to her dislike of Alex. In the end, Alex's independence and freedom from office regulations seemed to her to be reason enough for the family to think of him as a hustler. The Alexes lived quite modestly, a small 2-room apartment on the outskirts, 1 car, which Alex was always taking to the service station to keep it running. Alex had never been in trouble with the law. He did not offend Tara and his son. On the contrary, he always tried to please them. He gave flowers and appliances to his wife, gifts to Ethan. When Jennifer told David that a friend had called and they agreed to meet on the weekend, he was not very happy. "Do I have to go?" "It's Tara," David exclaimed. "What are you doing? I haven't seen her in what, 2 years or 3? 3, Jennifer replied. "Don't you want to meet her?" She changed her color to red. "And Ethan's in 2nd grade, can you imagine?" "I can imagine. Alex will probably be there too. It's a weekend, he's home on weekends." "We wanted to meet up. Tara's baking a cake for them." "I don't want to go out with him," David said. "Why I don't like him? You know why." In the evening, Jennifer called a friend, said that her husband categorically did not want to see Tara's husband. She apologized. Tara, surprisingly, was not upset, even pleased. It turned out that Alex was also not eager to meet David in his own house, and explicitly asked his wife to rid him of such a guest. "I thought they'd wise up as they got older," Tara concluded. "But I guess it's true that men's childhood at 40 is just beginning." Saturday morning, Jennifer made breakfast. While Patricia and Claire watched a cartoon, David, returning from a run, showered and helped her set the table. Then they had breakfast of oatmeal with cream and sandwiches. Leaving the kids to her husband, Jennifer dressed quickly, put a change of clothes and snacks for the girls, gifts for Tara and Ethan, and a phone charger in her bag. Dressed the kids. David offered them a ride, and Jennifer accepted. There was silence along the way. After waving goodbye to Patricia and Claire, David drove off. Alex, along with Tara, went out to greet the guests. After a welcoming hug, the girls briskly walked up the porch steps, not letting the adults take them in their arms and carry them up the freight elevator. They reached the 7th floor. The Alexis apartment looked the same as it had 3 years ago, when everyone had gathered for a celebratory dinner after Ethan's baptism. Except that Ethan's room had been redecorated. The crib was replaced by an adult one, a desk and a shelf for textbooks. There were more toys, too. Patricia and Claire were immediately interested in them. The 3 of them, and Ethan, sat on the carpet and looked at the toy railroad. Sometimes they stopped the train with their hands and attached new cars to it. Tara baked Jennifer, Patricia, and Claire's favorite cake. The aroma of baked goods and honey wafted throughout the house. "I wish David could have been here," Jennifer said. "He loves honey so much." Tara glanced at her husband as she cut the cake into slices. "David," Alex began, scrunching up his nose. "We're all adults here. We all understand why David isn't here." There was an awkward pause. Jennifer waved her hand. "I don't want to spoil the mood for myself and you. Tara, will you put a piece of this with me and I'll give it to him?" "I don't want to spoil anyone's mood either," Alex said. "Unlike your husband." "Alex, why?" Tara objected. "What's the point of these ceremonies? All of us, I think that David is a little complicated man, with a complicated character, harmful, in short, and too proud." Jennifer thought for a moment. "He didn't say why he didn't like you." "He said it was because I'm a scoundrel and a bad person," Alex answered. "Or what was it?" "A rascal," he said. "When he called you that, I don't remember," Tara said. "At our wedding you weren't around. Did you go to the restroom?" Alex laughed. "He said, I don't approve of your choice, but I support you. You're not a bad guy, Alex. You're kind of smart, but your business is murky. What worries me is that you're a crook, Alex. You're a crook. Tara, don't ever forget that. What an attachment." Jennifer took a few sips of her tea. "I don't understand. Maybe there's something we don't know with you. Did you nail someone or something? Or what?" Tara placed a saucer with a piece of cake in front of her. "Yes, Alex. Are you a criminal mastermind by any chance?" "I've never hurt anyone in my entire life." "So far," Alex answered. "Although the desire arises often. People often try to cheat when buying or selling cars." "Thank you, sweetheart," Alex said, taking the saucer from Tara's hands. "But I've never even once cheated anyone. Although there was such a desire, I admit. Sometimes I want to give people the same treatment they give me." "Don't take offense to David," Jennifer interjected. "Don't take offense to me." "Okay, how can you be offended by your friends?" Alex waved his hands. Then they gave the children tea with honey. "We decided to go out and walk a little to the nearest park so that Claire and Patricia wouldn't get tired on the way. They were put in Ethan's sled. Ethan himself ran ahead, showing his neighborhood. And here is the school where I go to school. And here's the store. And here's the skating rink," he shouted. In his hands, Ethan held a soft toy, a gift from Jennifer Tier. She had given Tara and Alex a porcelain vase of flowers, and Alex a soft horsehide purse. Tara lamented for a long time that she was a bad friend and a terrible person because she had forgotten about the gifts for Jennifer and her children. On the way to the park, she tried to think of what to get. "What about a cake, Jennifer?" she finally asked as they entered the tall wrought iron gate. "And gingerbread," Claire said. "I want gingerbread, like on the Christmas tree." In the park, they had built an ice rink for New Year's Eve. The children ran through the maze under Ethan's guidance, laughing with laughter from the running and the frost. Their cheeks were scarlet, and their eyes glistened with happiness. Alex stood, hugging Tara from behind and watching the children, occasionally intervening in the women's dialogue. Jennifer thought for a long time whether to tell her friend about her husband's strange part-time job during the holidays and her parents' reaction to what had happened. In the end, she decided to share her worries. "I still don't know if I did the right thing," Jennifer finished her story. "I don't know what it was. It was idiotic. He never told you what the part-time job was?" "Yes," Alex said thoughtfully. "No," David answered. "He said he'd tell me later. He couldn't right now, supposedly." "That's a strange story," said Tara. "My parents aren't talking either, keeping a secret, like partisans." Jennifer sighed. "I still can't communicate with them properly after all this. How do I treat them? As liars or as people who behave reasonably, unlike me?" Tara released herself from her husband's embrace, walked over to Jennifer and took her hand. "Jennifer, it seems to me that if he was supporting a second wife and children, the parents would have told you. It's not like they're immoral people." Jennifer smiled. "And really, I doubt my mom would have let him live peacefully on this earth after learning of his betrayal or infidelity. He's probably taking care of his grandmother or grandfather," Tara continued. "You know, he always stands up for the weak. Remember how you two defended me at school before Alex showed up?" Claire came running up, out of breath and tired. "I'm hungry." We decided to warm up at a nearby cafe with a children's area. They ordered mashed potatoes with chicken cutlets for the kids and hot pumpkin soup with cheese toast for themselves. When the Aiton twins got off their plates, they were taken away by animators so the adults could have a chance to sit quietly. Tara talked about all their family trips to Peru, Argentina, Italy, Sardinia. Jennifer listened with mild envy. She, too, loved traveling, hiking through new towns, getting to know the locals. Her suitcase was decorated with souvenir labels and stickers from Brazil, Sweden, Norway, Belgium. David was not such an avid traveler. He often flew on business trips for work. He had a poor tolerance for flights, so he associated traveling exclusively with something obligatory and unpleasant. Whereas Jennifer's greatest pleasure in her youth was to change her place of residence, David valued stability and routine above all else. After Claire and Patricia were born, their family travels were limited to Florida resorts. They rented a house by the sea or in the mountains for 2 weeks with a pool and a small garden, with a hostess who cooked the meals, or at least a family restaurant nearby. It was a kind of compromise between the comforts of home, a familiar lifestyle, and traveling. David had the privacy to negotiate, go jogging, and get a good night's sleep. Jennifer had a break from domestic duties. In the evenings, we all explored the neighborhood together, hiking trails, riding horses and chairlifts, watching the sunset, buying fruit, getting to know and chatting with the locals. Jennifer enjoyed going on these family mini-vacations, but really missed her independence and former penchant for adventure. She chased the resentment away by reminiscing about what a wonderful husband and children she had, and how much she loved them. I remember when I quit my job, when I wanted to be a housewife and devote all my time to my family. When I asked David to take over the family, Jennifer said nostalgically, listening to her friends' stories, "I think when the girls grow up and go to school, I'll go to work and we'll travel like we used to. I want to show them the world and remind myself that there is a world beyond our neighborhood." Jennifer called for the waiter. "We should go home. My girls are about to fall asleep." Alex paid the bill. Everyone got dressed and stood around the porch waiting for David. He was supposed to pick up Jennifer and the kids. From far away, they saw a car approaching. Alex and Tara said goodbye to Jennifer. David pulled into the parking lot beside them, turned off the engine, and got out to put Claire and Patricia in. "Hi, Tara." He hugged his friend and extended his hand to Alex. "Hi, who's this guy? Grown up, serious. Is it Ethan?" "Hey man, how's it going?" He listened to Ethan's short story about boxing, shook his hand, praised his courage. After sitting the yawning children down, he helped Jennifer sit down and closed the door. He turned around in passing. "Will we get together sometime? Sit down again?" "Sure," Tara nodded. The car was warm from the heater on the way home. David turned to Jennifer. "How's Tara doing? What's new?" Jennifer briefly recounted the highlights of Alex's family life. She didn't discuss the odd part-time job, the blown trip, or her relationship with Alex. David nodded contentedly. "Tara looks good. Ethan's grown up. Alex is doing well at work," Jennifer said. "Why are you so interested in his progress all of a sudden?" David sneered. "He's not worthy of such attention, is he? Didn't my attitude toward him bother you before? What's changed?" Jennifer thought for a moment. "I used to make excuses for you, allow the idea that you were right about him to some extent. And now I make excuses for him because you seem like a big leaguer." David laughed. "Well, what have you descended to?" They never spoke again. They drove the rest of the way in silence. As she lay down to sleep on the bed beside her husband, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling of squeamishness mixed with anxiety. David seemed like a stranger after meeting Tara and talking to Alex. She was uncomfortable being so close to him. She felt embarrassed and defenseless at the same time. She was overcome with a maddening sadness. She didn't want to ruin what she had spent years building, to feel her loved one drifting away and becoming a stranger. I wanted to cry. Instead, Jennifer pulled the blanket up higher, lying on her side, and bit her lip. New Year's vacation was over. Life was back to the same old, troubled routine. David went to work. Jennifer took care of the house. He would bring in the groceries on her list and be home by 8 o'clock at night. She would make him breakfast, walk him out, and greet him. While her husband was away, she would tutor the children. They read, molded, glued, cut, and played. They often went to playgrounds and generally tried to be around other children for longer periods of time. Jennifer wanted to prepare Claire and Patricia for kindergarten so that it wouldn't be a shock for them to be separated from their mom. While the girls slept in the afternoon after a walk and lunch, she researched private daycare centers on the internet, their locations, rates, and reviews. She found a couple of suitable ones and showed them to David. He approved of both but liked the one that was closer. The grandparents came on weekends, bringing jars of homemade pickles and jam and toys for the children. We didn't go to the dacha anymore. It was too far and exhausting to get to work. Neither of them brought up the subject of part-time work in their quarrel, and the spouses themselves did not discuss the events of the last few days, even among themselves. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but Jennifer felt a strange sense of unreality. Her life seemed to her a movie or a circus performance, and people in it actors. She thought of herself as an actress, and a very good one at that. Every morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she stared at her reflection for a long time. Her gaze was cold and hard, as if it had faded. The thought of Claire and Patricia seeing that look when they woke up in the morning made her want to drink. It's not the kids' fault, Jennifer decided. She put on her sweetest smile and the look of a loving mother before leaving the bathroom and going to wake the girls. Her parents and David noticed the change in Jennifer, asking, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so tired? Are you sick?" Jennifer waved it off. "I'm fine." It was a lie. She was sick. In March, Claire and Patricia started kindergarten. David dropped them off in the morning and Jennifer took them home in the afternoon. After a few weeks, the girls got used to the teachers and their group, started staying full-time and coming home later with their father. Jennifer got a job as an engineer at one of the firms where she had worked long ago before her maternity leave. They accepted her reluctantly because of her young children, worried that she would take frequent time off and sick leave. But Jennifer wasn't too worried about that, as she was looking forward to a new chapter in her life. She walked to work 2 stops on the bus, subway 30 minutes away. It was only an hour-and-a-half commute to get to work in time for the 9 a.m. start of the day. Jennifer left the house at 8:30 before her husband. So David would collect the girls and Jennifer would prepare their clothes in advance and hang them on the chairs. Claire and Patricia had breakfast at the nursery. Jennifer and David were in the office. They each prepared their own food in containers of scrambled eggs, sandwiches, porridge. They began to see and talk less often. Jennifer was glad of that. The less often she had to play the role of happy wife, the happier she felt. Sitting at the same table, she looked at him distantly as a guest and began to notice the small imperfections on his face, the wrinkles, the gray color of his skin. Jennifer looked forward to the summer and the long-awaited trip in the hope that she would be able to fall in love with her husband again, to regain the trust and intimacy she had lost. On May holidays, she wanted to go to the cottage with her parents and children. It was necessary to clean up the garden, make beds. Jennifer hoped that there would be an opportunity to talk to her husband alone, entrusting the children to their grandmothers, to discuss their relationship, to share their thoughts. After all, she thought, we can cry and separate. It's better than trying to live on the ashes of a relationship. To the surprise of her parents and David's parents, he refused to go to the cottage, citing ill health. "It's the heat," Jennifer's mother sighed into the phone. "I can't stand the heat, especially on the road." David himself said that during the May holidays he would be traveling to another city. In response to Jennifer's reasonable question about the permissibility and legitimacy of the management's decision to deprive employees of their legitimate days off, he replied, "There are several residents in a house there who suffered carbon monoxide poisoning due to a ventilation design error. We need to go and collect evidence of our innocence. You know how such cases are solved nowadays. They'll blame it on us and put innocent people in jail." Jennifer agreed and didn't object. But after she and Claire and Patricia had seen David off, standing on the porch and waving at the car as it drove away, she had an idea. "Girls, why don't you and I go to the cottage ourselves? It's cool, it's fresh, shade from the trees. They're probably already swimming in the river, aren't they?" She spent the evening thinking, and in the morning she packed a snack and called a cab. The ride was quick. The cab driver was pleased. "You're lucky you didn't go yesterday. There was such a traffic collapse on the roads, traffic jams in both directions. Everyone was going to their summer homes." As if they didn't know that they weren't the only smart ones, that the whole city would be leaving in the evening, and in the morning it would be a pleasure to drive on a free road, he said. Jennifer nodded and closed her eyes, putting her face in the cool breeze from the open window. The cab driver helped unload things out of the trunk and get the tired children out of their seats. After receiving his thanks and payment, he drove off, honking goodbye. Jennifer, Patricia, and Claire entered the yard. As they walked up to the porch, they looked for the key under a large concrete planter, and to their surprise, they didn't find it. So Jennifer muttered, "Grandma Samantha or your grandfather has hidden the key somewhere. We should call them." Jennifer's mother didn't pick up the phone for a long time, but on the second attempt she did. "Yes, Jennifer, hi Mom. Are you guys asleep?" "We just woke up," came a voice. "We slept for a few hours before the heat wave. My blood pressure spiked last night. How are you?" "We're at the cottage with the girls. We're at the cottage. I can't find the key. Where did you hide it?" There was silence. "Grandma Samantha, can you hear us?" Jennifer asked. "What are you doing out there?" "We came for a swim," she said uncertainly. She didn't want to be cooped up in the heat. "It's nice here." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why? I know you wouldn't have come with us, that you were all sick." Jennifer couldn't take it anymore. "Tell me where the keys are, please. I really have to go to the bathroom. I'll call you back later and talk to you if you want." "There's no key," said the mother. "We have to knock and call. You don't have to break it." Jennifer frowned. She walked to the door and knocked. She turned back to Claire and Patricia, who were looking at the dandelions. Footsteps were heard. Someone put on slippers and came to the door. "Is that you?" Jennifer heard a familiar voice. The door lock clicked. David, sleepy, covered his eyes with the palm of his hand against the bright sunlight. "Jennifer?" His voice was full of bewilderment. She looked incomprehensively at her husband, and he at her. Patricia and Claire ran up to David, hugging his legs. "Hi, Daddy. Hi, Daddy," they exclaimed. In the back of the living room, behind David on the couch, Jennifer noticed some movement. Her eyes bloodshot, her hands clenched into fists. Pushing her husband aside, without removing her shoes, she walked with a firm, determined gait to the couch and yanked the blanket from whoever was hiding under it. She saw a boy of about 4 years of age. "Daddy," the boy called out, crying. He stood up on the couch and reached out his hand to Jennifer, holding onto the headboard with the other. Patricia and Claire splayed their arms and hid behind their father. He walked over to the boy, taking him in his arms. He said softly, kissed him on the top of his head, and held him close. "Who is it?" Jennifer asked quietly, unable to feel her own lips. "I'll explain in a moment," David replied. "Who is it, David? Why don't you say something?" "It's your son," he said. "Dad," the boy said, staring at Jennifer with weeping eyes. It was Patricia and Claire's turn to cry after the strange child called their daddy twice. "I'll explain everything. Just calm down." First, David pointed his gaze at the children. On unsteady legs, Jennifer walked over to the girls, knelt down in front of them, hugged them, and wiped the tears from their cheeks. "It's okay," she repeated, not realizing she was crying herself. When the children's crying stopped, they took everyone into the kitchen, poured tea, put cereal on plates, and sat down at the table. Jennifer did everything in a fog. She broke a cup, cut her finger. When she finally sank into a chair, she realized how tired she was, how much she wanted to sleep and wander somewhere quiet. "Who is it?" She repeated the question she had asked earlier. "This is John," David answered, biting into an apple. "Alex's son." Jennifer's eyes nearly fell out of her orbits. "What, shush?" David took her hand in his. "You scare the kids, they'll start crying again. That's Alex's son. Tara doesn't know about him." "How does he have a son? Was he cheating?" She realized from the meaningful look in her husband's eyes how stupid that question sounded. He was cheating, which means he didn't tell Tara or me, Jennifer concluded. David took another bite of his apple. Why? His aunt, his mother's sister, is going to take him soon. She's in the process of getting custody. What about his mother? Jennifer asked. Ceased. They were hit by a truck while crossing the road with a friend. Last fall, Alex got a call from the hospital telling him everything. They found his number in his mother's cell phone. David put the apple aside. He was listed as John's dad and his name was on the certificate. Only Alex didn't want to take John in. So I took his son so as not to destroy Tara's family. Jennifer grinned and pulled her hand out. Sounds very plausible. Do you think you're lying to me? Yes? Then I'll tell you my version. She bit her lip. It's your son, the one you've been hiding from me. And now you're trying to come up with some ridiculous excuse. And you got your parents involved. Jesus, who was looking after him? Your mom, my mom, all of them. He was with a babysitter, David said. And you want to call Alex? He grinned wickedly. Let him tell him how he wanted to put his son in an orphanage. Latent tears rolled down Jennifer's cheeks, her throat dry. She left the table with the phone in her hands, walked across the yard, found a shade under a tree, and sat down on the grass. Dialed Alex's number. She waited with indescribable horror for the dial tone to change to his voice. Yes? Alex answered. Alex, hi. It's Jennifer. Did you find out why you're calling so early? Tara's here. Tara's at home with the kids. I went to get some water. Alex, is it true? Jennifer's voice trembled. Do you have a son? What son? He muttered. John. His mother died in the fall. The hospital called you, asked you to come over. I don't know any. Alex cut him off and hung up. Jennifer remained sitting on the ground with her cell phone in her hands, listening to the occasional bird trills in the apple blossoms above her and the dense buzzing of bees. After a few minutes, Alex called back. Well, how could you cheat on her? Jennifer asked, confused. She breathes you. She'd be devastated if she found out. That's why I'm not saying a word, Alex said. Is your son healthy? Cheryl began after a short pause. He's eating cereal. I'm drunk, Alex said angrily. We were celebrating a wholesale shipment to Chicago. Went to a bar, had a drink. I don't remember the rest of it. I woke up at her place. The poor thing ran through Jennifer's mind. But she held back the urge to sarcasm. She wanted to clear up the situation before the end, without any unnecessary scenes. Did you want to put your son in an orphanage, like David said? She asked after a silence. Jennifer, Alex began, choosing his words. You're not stupid, are you? What was I supposed to do? Bring him home, say, here, Tara, this is my son from another woman. He's going to live with us now? Is that it? David was wrong to get involved in this. My guys would have given him a hard time. He can't keep his mouth shut. Jennifer couldn't find anything to say. The only phrase in her head was, oh my God, oh my God. Alex shouted something into the phone for a long time, but she didn't listen to him, slowly lowered her hand with the phone, put it down beside her, and lay on her back. The wood stabbed, tickling her neck. Jennifer smiled. So what, you're not cheating on your wife? Chick. But can you call him a good man? Is it good to deceive Thera and hide the truth from her, she thought. She reluctantly got up, picked up her cell phone, and walked into the house. Patricia, Claire, and John were sitting on the carpet in front of the TV watching some cartoon. David was sitting with them. When he saw Jennifer, he headed into the kitchen with the empty milk glasses and with a nod of his head beckoned her to follow, loading the dirty dishes into the sink. Everything's soaked. Everybody's fed, everybody's happy, David said. They'll take them to the river after lunch. Jennifer pressed her back against the wall. Her knees trembled. We have to tell Tara, David. It's not right. He looked at his wife in surprise. Are you afraid of upsetting her? I'm afraid of betraying her. Covering up this infidelity, the child, is a betrayal. David ran the dishes in the sink, washed them, wiped his hands and stood across from her, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. "If you want, I'll tell Tara everything David said." Honestly, my tongue itched. "I'll stop you myself," Jennifer replied. "I'll tell her myself. I'll go into town tomorrow, meet her, prepare her somehow." "How can you prepare for something like this?" David frowned. "It's better to invite her here. Do you think Alex will let me go?" Jennifer's face stretched into a grin. "He's leaving today. I asked Elizabeth not to tell him where I was going." "Tell him David thought of something in his mind. Tell him it's necessary, that it's a surprise." For lunch, Jennifer made buttermilk dip. While she was cutting vegetables and chicken meat, she mentally imagined the conversation with her friend and the forthcoming explanations, choosing words. During lunch, she was silent and aloof for the same reason. She reacted to her daughter's appeals with a strained, guilty smile. After lunch, David put all the children in a garden wheelbarrow, threw an old blanket in the bottom of it, hung a towel around their necks, and took them to the river. Jennifer closed the wicket behind them, went back under her apple tree, dialed Thera. She answered almost immediately. "Jennifer, hi. If you want to call us out, we're just about to go to our swamp in the park, aka by the lake. Come join us." Jennifer laughed. "Beauty and your swamp. Call a cab. I'm taking you to my parents' summer house. The same one where we had our first vodka in 11th grade. "I'm on my way," Tara replied. Only Jennifer lowered her voice. "Don't tell Alex you're coming here and that you're meeting me." "Why?" Tara was confused. "That's the way it has to be. There's a surprise waiting for you that he doesn't want to show you." Tara mumbled something in her pleasant voice and promised to keep the secret. 2 hours later, Jennifer heard the creaking of gravel near the gate. She had spent the whole time lying on the grass and, as it seemed to her, had gained strength for the final act of the play in which she had been participating against her will for months. Patricia and Claire and David returned from the river, wet and happy. John was with them, too. By the time Thera arrived at their house, they were sitting on the rug, now drawing something on sheets of paper scattered on the floor. Jennifer met Tara's friend, hugged her, took her under her arm and led her into the house. "Where's Ethan going?" "He didn't want to go. He was meeting some friends," Jennifer said. "I asked my mother to watch him. She'd just run out for a visit." Tara stopped, pulled a bottle of burgundy liquid out of her bag, handed it to Jennifer. "I don't drink, she doesn't drink," Jennifer remarked. "Alex left for 3 days in Chicago. Who'd you bring it to?" "I guess it was fate that you invited me," replied Tara. They went into the house. Tara said hello to David and turned to John. "What are you?" "Lucky neighbor," John replied, staring at Tara silently. "Let's go get a drink," Cheryl called out to her husband. Tara put the bottle on the table. "Brought Mom's specialty." As she sat down at the table and sipped the tincture, Tara remembered her question. "So, who's the boy?" Alex's son, Jennifer exhaled without hesitation. Cheryl looked understandingly first at her, then at David. Their eyes narrowed under that gaze and looked down at the floor. "Alex's son? Alex cheated on you?" Tara asked. "A few years ago when he went on a business trip to Seattle. John was born. That's his name," Jennifer replied. She felt David take her hand. "His mother died in the fall. The woman's relatives couldn't be found, but the police found Alex's number in her phone. He came over and wrote a waiver, told his friends. They contacted me. I talked Alex into taking John. Found a nanny, paid for the upkeep. Now there's a good woman. Soon she'll adopt him and all this will be over." "Is this some kind of joke?" Tara interrupted her. "If this is a joke, it's not funny, guys." "It's not a joke," David entered the conversation. "That's what happened. I'll call Alex. He'll confirm it." The shot glass slipped from Tara's weakened hand. She leaned back in her chair and looked Jennifer in the eye, the corner of her lips twitching like a flag in the wind. She could see that tears were coming to her throat, that Tara was about to burst into tears. "And you've been lying to me for almost a year," she said. "Jennifer didn't find out until today. And I lied. Why? I didn't want to hurt you. And then today, all of a sudden I did. Jennifer changed my mind. She thinks it's wrong to keep the truth from you, that it's a betrayal, David said. It is, Tara blurted out. Tears sprang from her eyes. You're a traitor, David. She cried. At first it was only occasional quiet sobs. Then Tara fell face down on the table, covered her head with her hands and sobbed, shaking her whole body. David closed the door to the living room. Jennifer moved a chair over. She hugged her friend with one arm and stroked her head with the other. She told her husband to go to the children. And when he came out, Jennifer buried her nose in Tara's shoulder, crying with her. With each tear shed, it became easier and easier to breathe. Half an hour later, both were sitting on the kitchen floor, their cheeks in tears. A half-empty bottle of tincture stood on the carpet between them. Jennifer looked happy and elated. Tara, on the other hand, looked devastated. Good mother. Jennifer smiled. She got drunk in the middle of the day, Tara, and threw it away. How am I supposed to look him in the eye? What am I supposed to say to him? Oh my God. When you talk to your husband, said Tara. And you, Jennifer, you're smiling. I wanted to apologize to him first. But no. A lie to save him is a lie. Let him thank me for not nailing him with a rolling pin. I think I'm ready to hit Alex with a rolling pin. Swing it around and beat him lying down until I'm tired. We were worried about you, but now I'm more worried about your Alex. Jennifer poured a refill of the tincture and laughed. In the evening, Tara met John, sat him on her lap, and told him something long. John listened and nodded. Are you that good? Tara exclaimed loudly, kissing John on the top of his head. You're going to be okay. I will. After seeing Tara off, Jennifer made the bed and put the children Claire, Patricia, and John to bed in the attic room. They fell fast asleep after a long day. David prepared dinner tuna salad and leftover tincture. Dinner was eaten on the rug. Jennifer snuggled against his side, resting her head on his shoulder. I'm so tired, David, she said. Let's go to bed, David said. That's not what I meant. Not about sleep, Jennifer replied. She jabbed her index finger at David's solar plexus and his forehead. Tired here and here. Jennifer felt warm breath on her forehead and a weightless kiss. I'm sorry, David said. I won't forgive you for this circus. No forgiveness for you. And I'll give my parents a beating when I get back. I won't care about their blood pressure or their aches and pains, Jennifer said. She grinned. I'll make you beg for forgiveness. How about a divorce? I'll put my parents in a nursing home. And seriously? Jennifer paused to think. Seriously, I don't have the energy to think about it. I don't know how we can regain trust between us and build on what's left. I don't think it's possible. I'll be jealous and suspicious of you for the rest of my life. I'd rather get a divorce. David was silent for a while, sighed heavily. I wanted the best, but it turned out the same as always, he said. Why did you refuse to come with me then? Jennifer woke up. What could have happened in 3 days of vacation with John? Explain why you're here now. He cried, refused to eat, hid from the nanny, afraid of her, begged to go home. I'd come over. He'd calm down, that's all. When you said you were doing someone else's job because you were doing a better job, she wasn't talking about Alex? Jennifer asked. About everyone, David answered. The leaves rustled through the open living room window. It was starting to rain in the garden, and the wind was lifting the tulle, filling the room with coolness and freeing her head from her thoughts. Jennifer felt a sudden lightness, pulled herself up and stood up, wanting to finish the conversation soon and go to bed. This, David, is what I want to tell you next time. If you decide to save the baby, bring him to my house. I feel like a bad woman. Terrible. They stayed at the cottage for a week. They bought groceries at the local store, and from the grandmothers in the neighborhood, fresh eggs and milk. They started the day with a walk together in the morning and finished it in the evening with the same walk. Jennifer developed freckles on her nose and shoulders. David learned to chop wood and stoked the bathhouse. Claire brought a kitten from somewhere and shared it with Patricia all the time. They named him Leo and put him in the hallway. Patricia brought him milk in a bowl every morning. Claire's cat food. John didn't participate in the cat sharing. He preferred to sit on David's lap, digging with him in the vegetable garden, watching cartoons. Jennifer was not jealous of her husband, admitted that John needed protection and attention, but could not bring herself to believe that it was right and natural to have a third, alien child in their family. She looked forward to the arrival of Christopher and Aunt Elizabeth. Elizabeth arrived on May 8th. She was a tall, slender woman of about 35 with a high forehead and large, hot palms. Seeing her, Jennifer thought, this is what a mother should look like. John didn't know Elizabeth. He looked at her warily at first, but when he saw the pearl pendant around her neck, he glowed. Like Mommy's, he said in his childish language. Yes, that's right, Mama had one just like it. Elizabeth had a court date ahead of her where Alex would give up John and Elizabeth would become the legal guardian. They would now live together. Elizabeth rented a hotel room for the duration of the proceedings. Then John would go to San Francisco, where Elizabeth had a house, a husband, and a cat. We always wanted a child, Elizabeth confessed. It never worked out. We thought we'd sinned or done something wrong. But now I look at John and realize how well God has it all worked out. Jennifer had no doubt that everything would go smoothly. Elizabeth had called Tara the day before she arrived, promising not to talk to her husband until John was in good hands. She didn't want to rely on Alex's moods, and his idea of morality, from Jennifer's point of view, left much to be desired. She was immensely proud of her friend, who had turned into a strong, wise woman. After returning home, Jennifer called Tara to encourage her and arranged to meet her for the weekend. Tara answered in her normal voice. From her words, Jennifer realized that Alex, afraid of the proceedings and scandals, had decided to prolong his absence, which he had informed his wife the day before. I hope he doesn't show up before the trial, David said. Then he wouldn't have to lie. On the day of the trial, Jennifer took the subway to work, as usual. For a long time, she couldn't concentrate on the laptop screen. During the briefing, she chewed on her thumbnail. She was distracted for a long time, and looking at one point, she was ashamed of her absent-mindedness. She sincerely found no objective reason to worry about the fate of someone else's child. All the more reason to worry about nothing. Jennifer kept glancing at her watch. At 4 p.m., a notification appeared on her cell phone screen. I wrote to Elizabeth, "Everything is fine. John is with me. I'm so happy." In the evening, their apartment was going round and round. David arrived in the evening, bringing wine and appetizers. David's parents came to visit. Mom brought her signature fish pie. Not particularly caring about the comfort of the neighbors, they put jazz on the speakers, danced for a long time, hugging and joking. After the arrival of the police officer, they turned off the jazz, exhaled, put the children to bed, sat on the sofa, discussing the latest news. "Mom, I'm still offended by you. Mom, I'm still offended." "Until you give me the recipe for the pie," Cheryl said. "You're a career woman again." David smiled. "Daughter, you won't have time to bake pies." "Leave that to us old folks," replied Dad. Speaking of which, Cheryl said cryptically, "I want to quit. Don't look at me like that. It's true. I took the job to get away from the mess you made. But now there's no mess, and frankly, I don't want to work." Everybody laughed. They sat up late into the night, as in those distant times it seemed to Jennifer, when her life had flowed smoothly and clearly. She was very glad to be home again, in a warm bed, in this apartment, surrounded by people dear to her heart, not causing distrust, seeing David off with his parents. At the third hour of the night, closing the door, complained to each other about tomorrow's workday. 2 weeks of freedom, Jennifer boasted, wrapping her arms around her husband's neck. He kissed her for the first time in almost 6 months. He stared into her brown eyes for a long time. Gently taking her in his arms, he carried her to the bedroom. "What's the point of going to bed tonight?" he said, closing the door with his foot. At work, Jennifer was in the clouds with a blissful smile on her face. People who worked in the same office with her looked at Jennifer with bewilderment, trying to understand what this woman, who had worked so hard to get a place in the company and now had submitted her resignation letter and was sleeping on the job, wanted to achieve. She was awakened by a phone call. It was Tara. "You're at work. Can you speak freely?" she asked. I'm at work, but I can talk, Jennifer replied. Well, Tara sighed. He arrived today. I packed my stuff, put my bag on the doorstep. He bumped into her when he came in, started yelling from the doorstep, "You'll be sorry. I'll take your child away from you. You don't even have a real job." Jennifer's heart sank as she pictured the scene. "Are you okay?" she asked. "My parents kicked him out with the gifts he brought. My dad remembered his car, which Alex took and wrecked. Gone, basically," Tara exclaimed. "Jennifer. He's gone." Jennifer listened to Tara cry for a minute. "I'm sorry, he turned out to be a fraud," she said at last. Tara laughed through her tears. "Fraud is my favorite word. You know, Jen, if mine's a cheater, what's yours? A daddy for hire." Jennifer smiled.